It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions.
Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Sunday, November 9th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Some pretty interesting discussions, some interesting individual stories we're going to be covering today. That I definitely, most of which we've covered over the years. January 6th, for example, it's never stopped being an interesting story. Obviously the reality of the story for those outside of the partisanship is pretty clear, I would argue. Usually the partisanship sort of blocking one part of the story. You never really get in the full picture in the partisan team game, but definitely an important follow-up around the pipe bomb conversation, at least as according to Blaze's report and Thomas Massey kind of making it, getting attention within the discussion. You guys know this story. We've talked about it more than once, but it's interesting to see really on the way that I see this fitting into the conversation today is how the Donald Trump administration is handling it. And I would argue the most important point for me, because my opinion, and I think it's pretty clear, I think the U.S. government is an entity, not that you're, Trump administration versus the Biden administration is really just an entity that is using the paradigm to keep you in place. You can disagree with me. I hope you will, if you do so, I hope you will take the time to look into my arguments, but it's an opinion. We all can look at what we're seeing. But I think why that's important is that with this Trump administration aspect and Kash Patel and the FBI and whether or not they're doing anything about it in this moment, because I think it's important to reach the conservatives that need to see, in my opinion, that they're not actually doing what they claim. But hopefully in the bigger picture, both left and right, people can recognize that we've been doing this for multiple administrations and it never seems to be different. They're lying to you and they're trying to get everything they can get away with and keep you looking at the partisan issues as often as they can. So it's the way that they're handling this shows you, I think, that there's, like I've been showing with the rest, and we'll briefly talk about, that there's really no indication that anybody is going to go to jail. And I hope they do, on both sides, but we'll just got to start somewhere. And I certainly hope that they do. I just don't think that's what's going to happen. So we will talk about that. I'm going to start with some points about Pfizer COVID-19 shots in kind of in the Ozempic part of the conversation. And I'm really going to point to that. It's been, discussed. It's a very relevant point, but it's very, very varied in the conversation. And I want to give you some points on where I see that fitting in, but also just the absurdity of that being Maha. The idea that we're even as far as I can tell, nobody inside the real Make America Healthy Again movement is even pretending that a pharmaceutical shot is the healthy direction in any context, whether or not that might alleviate other problems. That is the mantra of Big Pharma. I don't know why they would be backing that up, but we'll go through why that's not really that different when you understand. But we're going to talk about some health parts around food that I think are very relevant. Steve has had on Slim a bunch of times on AM Wake Up. I need to reach out to him I want to get more into this from his perspective on the local, not just the regulation part of it, but as he talked about the infrastructure, the control they have on that, and the ability, rather the lack of ability from a regular farmer to make any money, let alone succeed when stifled for the interest of larger companies. And that's what this current administration is doing the same. And I want to go through why that's very important. We'll touch on the SNAP benefits we haven't talked about as I see it related to this larger point. Again, at people being deceived, what's really happening. And we'll get into January 6th, as I said, and how that overlaps with what the FBI is currently seemingly focused on, which some more updates on the Michigan FBI, what I see as a very clearly manufactured plot. We'll go through what continues to be a very flimsy case from my perspective. I could definitely be wrong. They're holding back information about this. They always do. But it's really clear to me, my opinion, that what's happening with the FBI and Kash, he knows that even his own team is combing through everything he's doing. And we should be. We should do that all the time. And he's worried, I think, that people are going to see through. And that's just my opinion. And I think what we're watching right now is an effort to basically put out as little information as possible in hopes that you will not expose what's happening. That's the way I'm reading this. But we'll go through the details yet again. Seems to be built on one element of it, like we talked about, and not really the two people they're aiming at. We'll go through it together. And finally, a major part that I think is important today. The two-party illusion. How long have we talked about this on this show? And I'm going to continue to, because I can, as I've said, I don't know, my entire career, the two-party illusion is the linchpin. It is the like, there's plenty of other things that keep people manipulated. But with that one thing, if we could remove that from the conversation, I think we would see a dramatic change very quickly. Now, that's not to say that there's not conservatives and liberals and whatever else you think you are. People have their ideas, and people who are either of their own mind can think those things, or because they're taken by the party, people can believe what they want. The point is, from the government's perspective, those don't really exist. And I mean, from the higher level controlling factions, there are people within Congress I don't even think are truly in the know, my opinion. My point is, they can believe those things too. But even they, at the end of the day, will ignore the division when it's in their interest to work together at the expense of you. Our own history shows you this. It's obvious as anything in the conversation. The point is, today, I, in my entire career doing this, have never seen the two-party illusion as vulnerable as it is right now. We'll go over the statements Candace Owen just said about Trump, and a lot of conservatives beginning to make this clear. Now, this is not just happening today. I have been pointing this out for a year, and I mean, like, for a lot longer than that. But I mean, the obvious. COVID-19, I thought it was clear then. Post-Trump's this current administration, you guys watch the show. I've been trying to call attention to the reality of the imploding two-party. They're losing control over the average American opinion. I don't know why that's not. I mean, I do think it's clear, just sort of like the every other conversation, Israel immigration. I also have the mind that most people see it. Most people are just not represented in the game that's being played today. The people online, it doesn't represent people anymore. The left-right paradigm does not represent most Americans. That's what I believe. And I think today, with Candace beginning to make these statements and where it's going, this is just starting to become mass adoption, or rather mass awareness of what has always been happening. Now, you could argue that's an effort to stifle, or sort of, like always, somebody can come out, jump ahead, and call the thing out in order to stifle it and stop it from happening. I don't trust any of these people. But at the end of the day, I point to what she's saying because I'm glad it's being said. And I hope that people can recognize this and not just fall for whatever trap comes next, if that's what's happening. Recognize what the two-party illusion does. Recognize what Trump is doing is really no different than what Biden was doing. It's a lot of narrative and a lot of continuation of the same agenda. And until we stop falling for that, we will never even be able to change anything else. That's the way I haven't been doing this, I don't know, 2 decades, really? At the end of the day, there are people out there, well, I guess maybe not in earnest, like I've been doing this my life, but let's say a decade in this show. There are people out there who have been doing this for 30 years, their entire lives, been similarly saying things the same way. The question is, why now? What's different and what's changing? I could go off for a long time about that, but I'm asking you to think about what that may be. Reflect in your life and look around yourself and think, what has changed? What's different in the world right now? I think you will be able to identify it pretty quickly. Let's start with a shout out to the recent show we just had that I really hope you'll take a time to watch. I've been enjoying these IMA panels the entire time. Really, proud to be part of it, and I'm glad we started it. But this one I really just enjoyed. I thought it was a really flowing, kind of just random, and we're just very casual with each other. Like you'll have a good laugh at the way we start. Good conversation. And this was about digital ID in general. And as I said, the linchpin of the technocratic control grid. Same point, but in regard to the technocratic change, the digital ID is without that one point, I don't believe they're capable of doing what they want to accomplish. That's not to say they won't find a workaround in the future. The point is, right now, without everyone adopting and accepting or allowing them to force you into digital ID, I don't believe they're capable of doing what they want to accomplish right now. So stand up. Recognize what this means. Recognize where this is going. Even if they have the best of intentions, it creates a world, by the way, that we're all fighting. Like we'll own nothing and be happy. And by the way, which is why I said that, let's overlap this with what Trump is talking about today, which we'll get to in the earlier segments here. 50-year mortgages and all, universal basic income. Okay, these are the same things. The exact same things. As Catherine Austin Fitts points out in a recent interview, Donald Trump is the most anti-capitalist president in history, in her opinion, putting out a lot of communist socialist efforts. I mean, the point is they're all building in this direction. But this show is entertaining and also very informative. And I think it's one of the main things that come through for me. We need to start defining individually, myself, all of us, where our lines are for this, right? What's the line? Not waiting until it's, you're being given a choice between your livelihood and your thing that day. Like, consider right now what that line may be. What am I willing to give up? Will I give my biometrics? Will I sign over my face print to join Twitter? What will you give up? And try to define those now. It's a personal thing. It's not meant for everyone else to criticize and judge. It's about you and our individual choices. I try to show you guys what I'm going through, whether Grok or anything else with this battle, But the point is we should individually try to find that line so we're ready for when that choice comes, because it's coming. Now, on some health overlapping points, well, this was just the first point that I want to include we're going to get into some different false information that we bring breaking down our entire career. This one is just a point that overlaps for everything. Didn't want you to miss it. We'll talk more about this in the next show. From The Guardian. Surge in anti-Semitism investigations at U.S. universities after October 7th attack, data shows, of course, meaning that it's, all of a sudden it just exploded in not that it was there, as this article shows, but that the investigation, the discussion, the reports went wild. And just to cut to the chase, please read the article. Zachary Foster points out only one of 102 anti-Semitism investigations at the U.S. universities over the past 2 years were unrelated to criticism of Israel. Meaning that if you really want to break it down, only one of those cases could be considered actual, I hate those people because they're Jewish. Maybe there's an overlap on the other 102. The point is that every other one of them were about Israel's doing bad things. Israel's breaking the law. Israel's committing a genocide. Israel's government X, Y, and Z. Read it for yourself. We are in a very dangerous moment where powerful entities, whether Zionist lobby, big pharma, whatever you want to discuss, I literally mean that in a broad sense, we are being sold out to the highest bidder in this country. This country is falling apart. The government is selling us out. It's been going on for a long time, but it feels like a fire sale right now to me. And this is just simply showing you that we are, as the people of this country, are being manipulated by whatever force decides to spend the most money or the most influence. And our media and our government seem to just let it happen. We were lied to, in case you missed the point, lied to about all the different Columbia protests and all the different stuff. They were manufacturing it, which we proved on the show many, many times. Just one more follow-up. We'll get into some same kind of points on COVID-19 right now. Now, in case you missed this, Dr. Mercola, peer-reviewed study finds COVID-19 vaccines, in quotes, because they're not vaccines, linked to 63 serious brain and spinal cord adverse events. This happens constantly. This is not 63 to now making 64. We're talking about a mountain of these. This is 63 new on top of everything else. Serious brain and spinal cord adverse events that they're linking to these shots. The same COVID shots that Donald Trump is still giving you. Despite all the claims, the lies, the narratives. Nope, there's your 2025, 2026 COVID-19 vaccine formulation from Pfizer and BioNTech Comirnaty. The Pfizer that Trump's making multiple deals with. Winning, hashtag winning. mRNA. Comirnaty, whole thing. So this is just to add to that, and this is about specifically the mRNA lipid nanoparticle spike protein. Now, the spike injections, exactly what they're doing with Stargate, exactly what they're doing at the self-amplifying shots, exactly what they're doing in general. That's the point. It blows me away that that's not the end all be all. It's over. They lied, which is kind of happening today, but just weirdly not in this conversation. I'm glad the Israel point seems to be in the breaking point, but this is horrendous. And they're still doing this. And you can read this for yourself. Here's the actual study. And it simply says, and the title is COVID-19 mRNA vaccinations, implications for the central nervous system. Now, I want to point out quickly, the reason there's so many different connected points, and this is not just random correlative, or rather, correlation. They're links to these overlaps like we've seen with myocarditis, that they also, by the way, we got kicked off YouTube for making that point. Funny how that's one of the most provable points in the conversation. And we're the one account they still won't let back on. How funny is that? It's because we're talking about a genetically modified, like a gene therapy dynamic. And so this is causing your body to freak out. So if you already have weird genetic issues or other things, this kind of thing could cause these things to go haywire or cause immunosuppressive or all sorts of crazy things. This is just continuing to show you this. And it says all safety signals reported are concerning and support an immediate global ban on COVID-19 vaccine program. Not just the one or the other, the whole damn thing. And guess who's doing that? Or rather, not doing that? Donald Trump. Which Biden was doing too. But in case you somehow think he's uniquely different than all this, it's just a bunch of narrative. Now, comparing the results to the influenza vaccine, which in of itself has problems. And by the way, you remember, we've got, not to get pulled into this conversation, there's so many ways to go in this. But the point, just to make it clear really quickly, is that the overlapping information was trying to grab it. This wouldn't let me highlight it earlier. Categorical produced a safety signal when compared to events after COVID-19 vaccinations to all vaccines combined. Just take a second and think about that. 39 events categorized. So compared to all other vaccines combined, this is just a dangerous thing. I don't need to convince you guys of this. The COVID-19 shots that are still being used are deadly. Here's another example of something we got lied to during COVID-19, which, by the way, the Trump administration are still actively using in all sorts of contexts. The PCR test, a calibration of nucleic acid by antibody test, PCR, in Germany. The course of SARS-CoV-2 infections estimated. Now, you know where this goes. We've talked about this ad nauseum. You know all this because we covered it endlessly. You have every reason to question everything you're told about vaccines, variants, vaccines, masks, and PCR tests, 2023. I'll give you a tag, just a general, for all the many different PCR-related content that we put out. I'll make sure to include the very important thing that should have changed the conversation from day one that the New York Times wrote in 2007 called Quick Faith and Quick Test Leads to Epidemic That Wasn't, literally showing you that PCR tests used exactly like they ended up doing it would lead to a fake epidemic. What do you know? I honestly think this was like, oh, okay, that's how we're going to use that. Look, it's not even, that's wild to think that's how simple this can be. Here's actually a show we did on it too. Now, that says that in Germany, a consortium of authority-accredited laboratories covered approximately 90% of all what they call SARS-CoV-2 PCR test COVID-19 test during COVID-19, specifically between 2020 and 2023. And they likewise conducted serological mass tests for antibodies regarding specifically COVID-19. Now, it says specifically, we show that scaling and shifting the cumulative sum of previous PCR positive fractions effectively reproduces the time course of the IgG positive fraction. The value of 0.14 found for the fitted, for the fitted scaling parameter means that only 14% of those who were tested PCR positively actually became infected with whatever they called SARS-CoV-2. This parameter fit further implies that 1/4 of the entire German population had already carried antibodies to what they say they needed because of these shots, or from these shots, which rarely made the case anyway, from natural infections in their blood at the turn of the year from 2020 to 2021. We showed you this from the beginning. The data showed that in the beginning of whatever they called COVID-19, that 2019 to 2020, most countries already had a huge portion of natural immunity because of other things, because it wasn't even what we were dealing with. This just continues to show you that at best, I think it was 10%. I'll read the conclusion as well. 10 to 14% were actually people that were maybe even, like, not that they ended up getting sick, but they were the ones that could be proven to have actually had something, or are able to get people infected. 14%, 10 to 14. Second, it says, well, the first part says, again, the principal finding from our analysis, only 14% and possibly even fewer, down to 10%, of individuals identified to have had SARS-CoV-2 via PCR were actually infected, meaning they didn't even have it, meaning the vast majority, over 75% of people didn't have anything and they were told they did. Or rather, at the very least, didn't have what they said was SARS-CoV-2. And it says, as evidenced by detectable antibodies. Second, and guys, we knew this in the middle of 2021, by the way, and we got shouted down by all the people. And during Trump's administration, during the second administration now, they're doing the same things. And Biden, it's not a left-right paradigm thing. Second, the proportion of the German population with the detectable immune response was already substantial by the end of 2020. That was the same point. You know, they already had these things pre-existing from before. Maybe it was MERS, or maybe it wasn't even there. Maybe it's all a lie. The point is, at the end of the day, they didn't need what they said they did. And even if you want to call this arguing from within their narrative, right? The point being is maybe you believe none of this is real. The point is still, nonetheless, the science they're telling you to trust is now telling you they didn't need it to begin with. You work it however you like. And it says approximately 1/4 of the population carried those antibodies at that point, following a trajectory determined almost exclusively by natural infections. At the end of 2021, practically the whole German population could be considered positive. So meaning they almost everybody at that point, which by the way was the highest push for shots in 2021, and they all had what they claimed they needed to begin with. Again, maybe that's not even what they needed. That's not the point though. The point is what they said you needed, they already had. On top of that, over about 90%, give or take, of the people weren't even infected when they said they were anyway. And I think of all the grandmothers and families that suffered and got isolated, died, suffered because of any number of treatments. They weren't even sick. And that's also overlap that with the reality that the vast majority, 90%, gosh, I remember what that was now. I could probably grab, I don't want to take the time. It was, that won't come up. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's the wrong one. Nope. Oh, well, I'm not going to look for it now. But the point was, you guys remember the Initis group and their research that came out, and it's still the standing body of evidence that nobody's challenged, which is that this was less than the flu from day one. Over 90% of the population was at less risk than the flu from the very beginning. And it only got less concerning as they told you. We were lied to from day one. And this is plainly evident. You can prove this with the very science they tell you to trust, and yet we can't, as a society, like as a central mainstream, including the mainstream alternative media, actually acknowledge that. What you get from a lot of people in the mainstream alternative is a bunch of kind of weird half narratives because now Trump seems to support the shot. They don't want to really dive into it too deep. This evidence-based and representative serological signal was disregarded, the study finds, peer-reviewed, in favor of relying on the weekly absolute number of positive PCR tests. And what did we say? What did Carrie Mullis say? That's not how nobody cared. Oh, you're a conspiracy, though. Are you a doctor? Are you a scientist? No. Turns out we were right, though. Not because we guessed, but because we were looking at the very facts that you were supposed to be looking at to begin with. It says unequivocally, the definition of incident yields a scientifically meaningless figure in the context of infection dynamics, as it depends entirely on the arbitrary or imposed number of PCR tests performed. Meaning right there, they could increase the amount of tests given and then use that very stat to say, look at how bad everything is, which is exactly what they did. Is it therefore, it is therefore not an objective indicator of epidemic, I can't even speak for some reason, read that right now, epidemiological reality, but an administratively imposed figure, more reflective of political will than scientific rigor. My God, where were these writers for scientific studies in the midst of all of this who are watering down all their findings to not get censored? Oh, well, that's why they did it. This is from Germany, which had a lot of pushback in this. The point is simple, guys. They lied to you. They lied to all of us, but we knew that already. You knew it on the show. The question is, will this get in front of the people that need to see it today? Probably largely Democrats. At the end of the day, people need to see this. Help people see it. Don't call anybody out. Don't call names that, people that might want to acknowledge the truth. Get it in front of them. Let them look at it. The point is that this was a manufactured illusion, just like the epidemic that wasn't, right? So exactly the way that this played out, it ultimately was used that way. I genuinely think that was a plan. Political will, giving more tests to manipulate everybody. Now, consider what's happening today. Right? Oh, and I'll include Arna Burkhart interview, Taylor Hudak, revealing the grave danger of mRNA vaccines. Had this interview been on like any other partisan platform, this would be, central viewing for literally everybody forever for COVID-19. And it still hopefully will be. The point is, if Tucker or Candace or anybody, even a fraction of their inside partisan side, had even pointed to this platform, this is easily the most important interview in the entire conversation. I would say that no matter where it came from, because of Arna Burkhart, because of Taylor Hudak. She put all the work into this. We simply funded it. The point is that she deserves all the credit for this, and it is outstanding and will change your mind. You should check it out if you haven't seen it. Now, let's not forget, again, with all that Donald Trump's administration is now still giving COVID-19 shots. And this is the new 2025 updated COVID-19 shot. I just don't know how that makes sense with what everyone says is happening right now. It doesn't, because they're lying. They're going off what the team says, not what the facts are, right? As always. And self-amplifying shots is what they're working on. Now, before we go past that, let's talk about this weird little this overlap. This is what MJ Truth Ultra saying, taxpayers will fund Medicare, Medicaid coverage of GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic. Great, because, it's healthy to take injections to lower your weight, right? I mean, guys, this is insulting to anybody who has any understanding. RFK Jr. knows well that this is the last thing. Maybe that's why he rushed out of the room when something happened. We'll get to that. But it says the MAHA movement was vehemently against injecting big pharma weight loss into Americans. What happened? Well, you see, what are you talking about? What happened? They are not the MAHA movement. You guys are in the world. These people are politicians. These are suits. They don't care about you. It's amazing that either these partisan mainstream alternative players don't care to think about that, or they only see it on the left side of it. I don't understand. Or they just don't care, and they're just acting like they're the baffled one in the middle of it all when their team's burning it out in front of them. I said, what happened is they lied to you, as they all do. The real question is whether conservatives will stand by them despite repeated lies and sellouts. I guess we'll find out, MJ Truth Ultra, as soon as they go to the next story and go, rah, rah, winning team. This is insulting. Here's what he said about this. And this weirdly is a clip that got cut out. Rather, the point is this isn't included in the part where the person passes out. I find that interesting. Not exactly the same moment, but I find it interesting nonetheless that that's not included in that part of the conversation. Here's what he said.
Significantly, Medicare and Medicaid will finally cover the cost of these weight loss drugs for millions of patients suffering from obesity.
And really quickly, think about how dumb it is to argue that even though it seems most of the snap, not a huge majority, but seems that most of them seem to be overlapped with Republican states. The point is that you're talking about that being unnecessary. We'll get to why you're now stopping that yet again, but then arguing that this can be paid for, right? We'll fund from the government through Medicaid, Medicare, drugs, injections to lower your weight, which are just insanely dangerous on top of everything else we're talking about, but that's okay. Why? Because that seems to be something it's a team thing. It's even though you're challenging your own side the point is the narrative is somehow that only Democrats are the ones using government resources. It's just not even true. We'll get to that point in a second. But Ozempic, right? Like that makes any sense to anybody who's actually caring about people's health.
Co-pays for Medicare patients will be as low as $50. This is tremendous savings. I mean, now you're talking about from $1,350 to $50.
Great. So you could pay $50 to take a shot that they claim will lower your weight and cause 75 other problems. Now, I'm being hyperbolic. I'm not an expert in the medical field, but what I know is any of these things will always come with their side effects, and that's how Big Pharma works. And so then you get more drugs to take the side effects on, which then cause more side effects. It's an old story, but that's why this works for the team, because you give them something you claim we're helping you, and all you're doing is becoming lifelong patients to Big Pharma.
This is tremendous news for the American seniors, and you all remember when I had 1/8 of 1% for the year. I got it 1/8, and I was so thrilled. But now we're cutting it 1,000%, 1,200%.
Me. I did this, and I'm great. I'm so great. I mean, just nonstop. That's not a I hate Trump thing. I think they're all ridiculous. Biden, Trump, they're the same thing to me. But the fact that this guy just can't ever, it's just funny. He seems like it's always about how he did something for you, as opposed to just going, look at what we did as a team, because I'm a leader. We all took a part. He's a bad leader. The point, though, is, guys, this is, and he says for elderly.
This news for the American seniors.
American seniors? What are we talking about? Just because it's a drug, therefore it's for seniors? Ozempic for seniors? They're tapping into talking points, guys. I mean, you should be embarrassed that this is something that people think represents you. Now, I thought this was hilarious. X23 report, who I haven't seen in a while, who's still apparently a blind Trump supporter, says, here's a video of the Ozempic executive fainting in front of Trump. Do you see why they're called fake news? No, here's the picture we use today, because it's a very weird picture and it is not edited. He's literally posing for the shots while the guys over there collapse. Now, here's what's funny to me. The way he edits this is an effort to try to make it seem like he didn't do exactly that. He did, and I'll make it very clear if you go through, pausing and holding a whole clip. He looks at the guy, which is just as weird, by the way, whether he's facing the camera or looking at the ground. It's a weird response, but I'm also going to add to the side of that he's the president of the United States. Was he going to jump down there and start giving somebody CPR? It's not his place. He's probably not even. So it's a middle point. But I find it funny that people are so desperate to, give you the lens to see it the way they want you to see it, that they'll just do something like this. Now, the point in all of this is, on top of that funny overlap, is that this guy, the Ozempic executive, passes out in the middle of this whole presentation. And RFK weirdly slinks from the room. Now, I don't know if that was connected. It's hard to know for sure, but it's weird. The timing is very weird because RFK and the health and Ozempic. I mean, RFK is not going to tell you this stuff is best for you before Trump's administration. He would have told you why this should never be taken. And here we are. It's weird, right? But on top of that, just the overlap of what about the COVID-19 shots? Are we just pretending like that's not an also possible thing? All these mainstream people could be collapsing from shots still, couldn't they? It's just funny how the timing just changes the way we view things. just worth considering. Here's the clip.
Science and creating high-value jobs. But today are you okay? Gordon, you okay?
Now remember, guys, that's not normal. Before COVID-19, that didn't happen. Like, it happened, right? There were occasions where people, but not like the amount of people on news broadcasts and playing sports in the middle of the White House press briefings, or, just, as well as I, now that we have, defibrillators every 30 feet in every school, like, it's clearly not normal. Something changed, and we all know that. It's just interesting to think about that in this context, and now maybe adding new things. My opinion has always been that it was never just one thing. It was never just the COVID shot. That was a catalyst, yes, and it did, I would argue, largely responsible for what that thing was. But we have been overwhelmed with things that have caused this, and I think synergistically hurt us in a very obvious way at one moment, peak moment. This is just possibly overlap, but who knows? Maybe he's taking Ozempic, and that's why he passed out. You can't know for sure. Everyone wants to assume. I find it interesting overlap. So Trump's standing there looking at him, right? You can see with his face, which, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like maybe something, a little more emotion, but yeah, I'm not going to judge. Who knows whether he's, they got it. They're doing their thing. But he's out. I don't know why they lift his feet up though. Am I out of date on the medical procedures? Why are his feet in the air? Tell me, I'm honestly asking. I don't know, because even CPR has changed. Once before it used to be breathing and pumping, and now apparently it's just pumping. I mean, it's weird. So tell me, actually, on the side note, why they lifted his feet up? Okay. So now they start taking pictures. He cuts right there for obvious reasons, because Trump turns and gives them a photo shoot. I mean, that's the part that I find very weird. You're in the middle of this guy literally possibly dying, and you turn and give a front-facing photo shoot for the people in your desk. It's an odd thing to do. And you can see why he cut it right there, because he starts to turn and they all start snapping. Oop, cut. Now it's back to the other part before he did that. Now he stands up. That didn't just happen again. That's cutting it back to the beginning. He cuts it again right there to make it look like it's longer. These people are very deliberate. Yep. Right there. Watch, cut right there. Okay, and then it turns. Now you're in cameras. That's the part you just saw. It's about a 3-4 second thing. So he turns. And he starts taking pictures. Okay, so let me ask you something. Reflecting on this post, how is that even fake news? What are we talking about? Oh, here's the guy he's pointing to. Now, again, I think they are. All the corporate media, mainstream alternative, a lot of the people doing the same thing you're doing are very much manipulative and fake all the time. But this person says, who is Harry Sisson again? I forget. But he says, someone passed out in front of Donald Trump in the Oval Office, and this is how he reacted. A photo that perfectly encapsulates who he is via Andrew Hernick Getty. No, what am I missing? You mean, so if he had taken the picture with him facing the other direction, that would have been honest, and this was not? See what I mean? Like, this is just desperate team sport politics. Both sides doing it, right? It's just pathetic. But this is what I just found that was interesting. That wouldn't have been brought up if we weren't talking about Ozempic and the overlap of all of it. But I just thought that was very telling. But the Ozempic part of all of it, guys, is clearly almost a slap in your face. It is insulting to anybody who actually believes in what they were selling to begin with. Thomas Massey says, just a reminder, both the Republican continuing resolution and the Democrat alternative will continue funding transgenic edible plant vaccines. See, when you just cut through all of the nonsense and get beyond all of the talking points and all of the back forth lying theater, you can cut through it like this. That should matter above a lot of things. Both sides are literally continuing to fund putting vaccinations inside of your food. That's not a secret. It's not a joke. It's not a conspiracy theory. In 2023, he says I unanimously passed an amendment defunding them. But at Uniparty, Mike Johnson discarded the underlying appropriation bill for the omnibus bill. Here we are. One team, guys, and they're all fighting against you. If you could just take a breath and recognize that these people are not fighting for what you want, unless what you want is Trump to win. Or like just claim he's winning, or whatever the side game it is you're playing. This is alarming to me. And as I said, so apparently Ozempic, Bill Gates' fake food, transgenic edible vaccines, and even now COVID shots, the new one he's putting out, are Maha, apparently. Or is that just what the blind followers are screaming with millions of followers on Twitter, right? Speak up, conservatives. Genuine, real, honest conservatives out there. Speak up. Show the nation that you are not what the two-party illusion pretends you are. I think that's a very important point for today. Left or right, I don't think they're represented properly. I think more people are seeing this than anything else. Aaron Day says Trump Maha are implementing, now in my mind, that means the administration, not the people, are implementing complete top-down technocratic medicine. Get out now while you can. Operation Stargate, Palantir Health, complete AI surveillance, including genetic information, health scores, rationing based on AI. I mean, these are very public points they're making, guys. It's not a joke, he says. We've been completely rugged. I completely agree. And that is sort of what's coming out today. He says, dump all health insurance, put your assets in medical trust, use medical tourism. That's all his points, his opinions. Take that for what you will. Here's what Trump said. I'm recommending to the Senate Republicans that the hundreds of billions of dollars currently being sent to money-sucking insurance companies in order to save, excuse me, the bad health care provided by Obamacare. Right, it's always Democrats bad, so just whatever I say next is what you should all agree with. He says, I think they're all bad. It says, be sent directly to the people so that they can purchase their own much better health care. Now, I don't disagree with the idea of a free, a dynamic where people can choose what they want. Obviously, that's liberty. But what's the problem is that they love to say things like that and then present you with something that is worse than before and argue, here's two choices you can pick from, and you're just trapped in the same problem. Now, that's just a broad analogy, but it doesn't even fit everything that's happening. My point is that I don't believe they're actually going to give you a free choice for the free market. That never happens, especially when they're trying to force their things on you, which they are. You can see it plain as day. He says, in other words, take from the big bad insurance companies and give it to the people and terminate per dollar spent the worst healthcare anywhere in the world, Obamacare. Unrelated, we must still terminate the filibuster. that thing too. It's not about Obamacare or one or the other. It's about the corporations that have influenced and controlled the outcome of policy in this country, whether through lobbying or anything else for their benefit. I mean, if you can't understand that Big Pharma and Pfizer and BlackRock and everything else that's like literally holding hands with Trump right now is exactly what he's pointing to, saying that we're going to stop. They're on the team. They're on the same team for what they're transitioning into. This is not going to be in your interest. I agree with Aaron, guys. This is going in the wrong direction, and we're being played. And on that note, to make this even more clear with transgenic vaccines, we just talked about this. Trump's admin, when saying they were ending them, is actually leaning into self-amplifying shots. Amplitude Therapeutics, Arcturus, making self-amplifying COVID-19, flu, bird flu, all sorts of things currently being worked on. They're already got the Comirnaty shot out from Pfizer. On top of that, under the guise of ending mRNA, and they also push the idea of RNA in food. If you read from this show, RFK Jr.'s post, it was very clear. We claimed we're stopping the COVID shot. They weren't even doing that, but they made clear that RNA, mRNA, and every other category was continuing. Food and transgenic vaccines is not in that category, meaning they are going forward. That's just one of many that they're continuing. There's lies everywhere. Every which way you turn, the Republican Trump supporting side is being played everywhere. I'm of the mind that most of them see it right now, especially with someone like Candace and Tucker starting to call these things out. Just sure wish we would have been able to see this before Trump got put in that place. Not to suggest that Kamala was the alternative, but recognize that both of them would have led us here, and maybe finally this country can have some actual change. Now, in regard to the overlap of SNAP and some funding and some health discussion from food, meat, kind of the overlap, all of this is about freedom. Freedom of choice, freedom of food, freedom of, being able to choose your path, whether you want raw milk or whether you want to buy from your local butcher. Right now, that's not the way the country works for a lot of reasons. Chad Prather says, NBC twists words saying Donald Trump and Walmart Thanksgiving meals cost less but come with less. And Trump shuts it down and drops the ultimate mic. I have to laugh at this. The same thing that Brian, what's the name? Haggerty and Nick Sword, all the same. They do this every time where somebody asks a question. And I laugh at the corporate media left and right. They're all children. They're all ridiculous. Doesn't mean everything they say is always false. She asks a question about something that I can prove to you is actually the case. And Trump goes, oh, you're fake news. And then I'll go, yeah, he showed them. I'm like, well, you guys are it's the most childish thing in the room. So that's your answer to yell them down? Is it true? Oh, yeah, it is true. But he said fake news. So yeah, we're winning. Like, these are children, guys. This is a Chad Prather. I don't even know who he is. 583,000 followers. And his reaction is, you're fake news, and we're cheering that Trump might drop them. Well, here's what he said. And this is something that is not it's a very small point. Frankly, I think it's sort of flooding the zone point to get you distracted and trying to go lie all over the place. In some cases, it's important. Here's the clip of the exchange, and then we'll go into what is actually happening, which is that he's wrong. The lie of Walmart was a small thing, but it was. They're smaller, different year. We'll go over it.
Product, the Walmart Thanksgiving meal,
Yeah.
and it is cheaper, but it also.
Oh, and then to start, I should have included, which we just went over, even asking Grok, looking up the consensus. Trump keeps trying to claim that grocery prices are down. Like, not for some in certain circumstances, like for everyone across the country. They're just not. They're more and they're higher. Almost everything is higher for everybody right now. Very few, not like most people in most categories. That's the easiest thing to prove right now. So that's to say that he's now just continuing to lie to sell people who are his team about how they're all winning, even though they should know better than anybody that they're spending more. So that just shows you that there's so many people out there that are willing to ignore their actual circumstances to be able to yell for a certain team. I don't believe that can possibly be the majority. I just don't. In fact, I think we can prove that, but consider that it's not.
Thanksgiving meal,
Yeah.
and it is cheaper. Product, the Walmart Thanksgiving meal,
Yeah.
and it is cheaper, but it also contains less. As affordability.
Well, I haven't heard that. You're telling me. Who you with? Who you with?
I'm NBC News.
Oh, sorry. I just said I haven't heard that, he says. Meaning you don't even say you know for sure. You might be wrong. She might be right. But your reaction is?
Who you with?
I'm NBC News, sir.
Fake news. NBC. You're fake news. What a NBC's gone down the tubes along with most of the rest of them.
Now, look, you could argue he's trolling just to make people laugh. But this point is the same. He's doing that, trolling. He's doing whatever you think he's doing, whether it's sincere, a joke, whatever, to ignore the point, which is that he's wrong. Simple as that. And that you're being misled about the reality of your financial circumstance, right? That should matter. But everyone loves to go, yeah, don't go on the Democrat. I shouldn't say everyone. The team sport mainstream alternative media at the expense of literally everything they claim you're fighting for, which is pretty damn embarrassing if you ask me. But this is just a graphic. You can look this up for yourself. Ask Grok, do whatever you want. It's very basic. The fact is, like she said, it's cheaper, but yes, much smaller. So you're playing people, but it's a tiny point. It shouldn't even matter. The bottom line is the large outcomes in regard to what they claim. Why aren't vaccines enough for people to call out what this is, well, let alone everything else? Or how about this conversation? Judge orders Trump administration to fully fund SNAP. Now, this is just a quick overlap. Remember, the way that this starts, and it's still basically happening. I think Trump put out on Truth Social that the Democrats are like almost, what's the word he used? Something like terroristically, some very extreme word about how their Democrats are, keeping it shut down because they want what they, whatever. As always, guys, let's not be children. It takes both sides to keep a shutdown going. Either one of them could bow if they argue that they want the people to have what they want. Okay. So when they go, the Democrats won't bend, well, that means you won't either. Like it's so funny how childish adults can get when it comes to, I don't know, waiting in line at the I'm blanking on the word all of a sudden, at the, going to a amusement park, right? Waiting in line at the airport or talking about politics. There's two things that come to my mind. If you want to see adults act like the smallest, most immature children, go watch them get cut in line at an airport. It's insane. Even though you all have a seat that you're assigned, people are ridiculous. Kind of making a joke there. The point is, though, in politics, it's the same way. I watch grown men, grown women who are intelligent suddenly act like the dumbest person in the room because they have a political side. The point is that realistically, it's obvious that both sides play a part in keeping the government shut down. I shouldn't even have to say that. But then it got to the point to where they were arguing, they want to fund illegal immigrants. That wasn't true. There's elements of truth to the larger point, but what they were saying was false. And at the end of the day, they got to the point where they were standing this down. I'm good. Keep it shut forever. Makes me happy. Despite the fact that people will suffer in that. I understand that. I'm not saying I don't care about people who aren't getting what they may need. I just have the mind that in the long term, it's in everyone's best interest to not be reliant on the government. But I get it. I'm not going to say it's, there are people that are really suffering, people that have come to rely on that. And that's because the governments they want that situation, right? So it behooves you to try to work away from that. But here we are. And so now they're arguing that the Supreme Court had ruled that they had to. So he started to, or there was a ruling and then the Supreme Court ruled that he didn't have to. So here's the overarching point. It ends up where it comes down to his choice. Okay. So he's over here saying that you're not getting all this because the Democrats. Then there's an opening to do it. Then he gets the opportunity to not, and he steps in and doesn't. Simple as that, guys. So judge orders Trump to fully do so. Okay. Then they get a ruling. Trump administration tells states to undo full SNAP benefits because of the Supreme Court. Trump administration is telling states now not, as of today, to not pay full November food stamp benefits, revising its previous guidance after winning a temporary victory at the Supreme Court on Friday. Quote, to the extent states sent full SNAP payments files for November, after he just said this would happen, this was unauthorized, he says. Accordingly, states must immediately undo any steps taken to issue full SNAP benefits for November. That's what the memo states. I mean, that's just the bottom line is you first created the situation, both sides of it. Then you try to use it to go look at what they're causing because they want to do X, Y, and Z. Then it becomes a very clear reality that a huge portion of that are Republicans in Republican states. And so they try to walk it back and act like they're going to do it. Then they get the opportunity to do it. And then once they get the allowance to not, they shut it right back down. They don't care about you. I don't know why people can't see that by now. And this is, when they can, they try to make it out to be a bunch of Democrats sucking off the system. But as far as I can tell, that's not even the full picture. But these things are always very hard to define. Because again, to say Democrat versus Republican does not even represent the most of the country. But they push you into those categories because you're in that state and vice versa. The bottom line, guys, is they don't care about you in regard to people that are currently struggling. And they want to use your strife to make you mad at the other side. That's a perfect little microcosm of where we are in this country. Now, here is a memo from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This is what it says. The memorandum is a follow-up to the guidance shared on October 10th. The bottom line, Supreme Court grants the U.S. Department of Agriculture an administrative stay of the orders issued by the District Court of Rhode Island. So that was the lower court that won, and the Supreme Court gave them at least a momentary stay. And it says, pending any explicit direction from to the contrary from the FNS, states must not transmit full benefits insurance files to EBT processors. I mean, why wouldn't you just, if your whole point is this is what's stopping people, why wouldn't you allow that when the court ruling was there? Why seek an avenue to not help American people? Because you understand, this doesn't then stop the shutdown. They can still have their little political game of maintaining the shutdown. They just didn't care because I think at the end of the day, this would alleviate the pressure. So as it says very clearly right here, I think this is where they pointed out. Oh, did I lose that? Anyway, just to cut to the chase, I forget. I think it's right here. I just didn't highlight it. The simple point to make is that they allowed this to continue because they need the snap the dynamic to be able to try to muscle it, what they want from the left-right paradigm, right? Within the teams, within the shutdown conversation, Democrats versus Republicans. Not necessarily that they, at the end of the day, are not all fighting for the same thing. They are working for their unique independent interests. And at this point, at least, let me put it this way, on top of all of that, maybe they're just saying this to make you think that the point is that they can use the SNAP benefits as a coercive tool to pressure the Democrats to get what they want, but while making sure you suffer, right? It's more important than them to use the SNAP benefits to manipulate the situation than to allow you to get what you need. As always, guys, they don't care about you. Now, on top of all of that, we have, and this is what Trump is saying about SNAP benefits. He says our country has to remain very liquid because problems, catastrophes, wars, it could be anything. We have to remain liquid. We can't give everything away. Well, as, what's this guy, Senator George Ruman Gallego, who I'm not familiar with, but the point is, left or right, it doesn't matter. It's the sentiment that says this would be a stronger argument if you hadn't just bailed out Argentina for $40 billion. Right? You can't act like now you need to make sure we're there when you're $40 billion. That, I mean, you know how much that could solve the problem right now in regard to this one point. No, but that went to a failing country because it's a Zionist country that's selling out to their highest bidder, like everywhere else you can see right now. So it's not about being liquid. It's about getting what you want from it. In this case, you're willing to sell out the country to benefit a Zionist interest in Argentina. But Attorney General Pam Bondi, after Donald Trump points this out, says, our investigation is underway. My antitrust division has taken the lead in the partnership of our friends with USDA and Secretary Brooke Rollins. He says, I've asked the DOJ to immediately begin an investigation into the meat packing companies who are driving up the price of our beef through illicit collusion, price fixing, and price manipulation. As far as I can tell, that's not even what the meat industry thinks. Remember what happened when we talked about this? The meat industry spoke up, especially around the money about the buying foreign beef. And they said, and on top of the fact that they can't sell, their prices are too, and Trump chastised them and said, your prices are good because of me, basically shut them down. So now almost now admitting there is a problem, even though you just said it wasn't a problem. Now you're saying it's not because of what we did, it's because of the meat packing companies, which there's not necessarily, see, this is how they play this. That's not necessarily inaccurate. The point, though, is that it's a larger manipulation, a larger paradigm of corruption that they are part of. But it says, we will always protect our American ranchers, and they are being blamed for what is being done to the majority foreign-owned meat packers who artificially inflate prices and jeopardize the security of our nation. You know, you could easily get around this. Stop controlling the food supply. You could easily allow American farmers to sell to their American communities, but they don't want to do that. They want you to work through their avenue while acting like they're doing this for you. And it says action must be taken immediately to protect consumers. Action, more control, shut it all down. Here's Bill Gates' fake meat and fake butter. You know, that's what they're building behind it all. And it says combat illegal monopolies, which is literally what the government is, and ensure these corporations are not criminally profiting at the expense of American people, like literally they're doing. I'm asking for the DOJ to act expeditiously. So you're now conducting, like, it's funny how Trump at the executive branch through Truth Social seems to be conducting investigations through DOJ. Not the way that's supposed to work, by the way. And this guy simply says, no, you're not. Massey points out recently Brazilian-owned meat packer JBS, through its U.S. subsidiary Pilgrim's Pride, donated $5 million to the Trump-Vance inaugural committee, which was the largest single contribution to the fund. As long as we don't have country of origin labels on our beef, this is all just BS. They're going to pick and choose who they go after and allow. The point is they can decide. These people don't care about you. You get the common thread so far? Now, Red Pill USA says this Zionist grifter piece of SHIT scored $40 billion for Argentina while you're stuck with a 50-year mortgage, which we'll get to toward the end of the show. They're mocking you, laughing right in your face. Here is Argentina's president doing the Trump dance at Mar-a-Lago after getting a $40 million bailout. At CPAC. Because that's all that matters, right? He does the Trump thing. Oh, we're all Trump supporters. This is all it takes, apparently. Same as the left, same as the right. Partisans. Apparently, it's all about buzzwords and talking points. Here is an example of the country being sold out. And by the way, they're not. We need to do a focus on Argentina at some point. It's just wild to me how clearly this is corruption. So here's what this comes to. Homesteading for Sovereignty put this out. And I think it's a clip they clipped out of a documentary, which I will try to find myself. And I think this is the guy's account. So you can follow him. I should include that. I followed him after I saw this. Joel Salatin, owner of Polyface Farms, does a really good, it makes an important point right here. So my first point, the first thing is he's homesteading for sovereignty says it shouldn't be illegal for me to sell my neighbor a pork chop or a pound of ground beef from an animal born, raised, and processed on my farm or their farm. I will not comply. He says food is fundamental to life and government shouldn't be involved in a food transaction between neighbors. But they are. Trump administration, Biden administration, and everyone before it, guys. And it's only getting worse. More increase. Remember all the, World Economic Forum overlaps? Well, they're not pointing to that anymore, but they're doing the exact same things. Controlling the food supply, shutting down local farms. I mean, it's exactly what we're talking about. You're just not hearing it from all the mainstream alternative media that were highlighting it during the left control structure part of it. When now it's Trump doing it, they just don't point to it. The Democrats aren't even pointing to it as much in the first place, so they just stop pointing to it. Here he's basically calling to Trump in hopes that he will listen and do something positive. I hope so.
My current policy rant, and it's getting some traction. I'm not reluctant to let it go very public that I am seeking a 30-minute pitch platform with Trump. There it is. Everybody knows. And there are some people in very high places that are agitating for that. For what? Very specific. A food emancipation proclamation. What does that mean? What that means is if you and I, as consenting adults, want to exercise freedom of choice to give our microbiome provenance agency, these are all phrases, right? We should be able to engage in a food transaction without asking the government's permission. Period. Across the board. I don't care whether it's raw milk, homemade charcuterie, cheese, butter, tomato soup, bone broth, whatever it may be. Neighbor to neighbor food transactional commerce should be able to happen without a bureaucrat involved.
It's amazing that's even contentious. Well, what happens if I get sick? Well, then you deal with your problem, right? You're a self-responsible person, right? How do you know that's where it came from? The point is that you can choose to go buy whatever you want. You can choose to drink water out of the gutter. It's up to you. You get sick, that's your choice. That's your responsibility. The world in which we live, where we suddenly argue that the government's got to step in every time I stub my toe, is exactly the problem. And people develop this need to always blame somebody when everything goes wrong in front of them, right? You trip and fall over something. Why isn't there a rail right here? You're the one that tripped and fell. It's just very frustrating that we have to live in this sort of nanny state, maternalism, because of people who are over-reliant on the system. And so at the end of the day, what he's talking about here is freedom. It's liberty, guys. It's food freedom. Now, I'm of the mind that it shouldn't be just neighbor to neighbor. I should be able to go buy from anyone I want, wherever I want, if I'm willing to exchange. It's free exchange between free human beings, peer-to-peer exchange. We don't need taxes between us. We don't need to include the government when I'm buying meat from your farm. That is what they want. That's what they need. Not just for money, guys, because they need to control. I mean, look, if we really want to get into where this is going, whether we're talking about the, pharmaceutical overlap, the surveillance overlap, the sort of technological developments, it gets so much darker. The truth is you can prove all of this, but just make it as simple as control over your life and what you consume and what gets to grow and what gets to succeed. Governments are involved in all of it. So I simply said on this case, if you think for 1 second that the U.S. government, any side of it, Trump's administration, Biden, anybody else, will allow that, what he just said, then you simply do not understand their goal to control your life. Only a few in Congress will even discuss this topic in earnest, and none of them are in the current administration or the last one. Surprise, surprise. Very, very clear. Now, here is Bacon and Bits pointing out what Beef Initiative said. This is Slim that we've talked about before on AM Wake Up before. He simply says, hey, Zohan Ramdani, since you hate Trump so much, why don't you reestablish the meatpacking district as a hub for local beef? That'll show him. You see, I don't think that'll happen. You see, because these people, when it comes down to government control, don't want your true freedom in this kind of dynamic. They don't want, this is, whether it's about controlling the food supply, whether it's about controlling commerce in that regard, or any number of overlapping points about health, government wants to be involved in these things. But see, what he's saying is, look, you don't like what Trump is doing, then give people freedom in this regard. But you see, he doesn't want that, in my opinion. Because like I said before, Mamdani, despite what I see right now as being a correct stance on Israel, which I'm skeptical for a lot of reasons, whether that's just hype, but I'll support what he says if I think it's right in regard to Israel. But my point is, he wants more government, like they all do. They want, despite Trump and Elon yelling lies to you, the government's much, much bigger than it was before. They all do that. He is very adamant about more government, more programs, more in your life. I want the opposite. You can decide what you want. We can disagree on that. That's okay. I don't want that. My point is that you could argue that if you want to see him as an outsider pushing back against the thing, just recognize that they all, whatever within this discussion, they're all insiders, even Mamdani. So we have to really think about what that means. Now, if he makes choices like this, like I'm seeing Massey start to do, well, I'll say, look at that. That's a positive choice. And I have one more step in the direction of maybe in the future thinking he might be on your side. Probably never, though. That's where we are in the world. But it's an incremental thing. It's about consistency of choice and outcome and precedent. How many times have they continued to follow through with their principles? Hopefully, always. And then you can argue somebody's actually means what they say. Now, overlapping on the financial side of it, Janice Girl shared this again recently. Jimmy Dore pointed to some of her research again. We recently put this article out with her, How American Tax Dollars Prop Up Israel's Zombie Economy, written by Janice Girl. It's wild. And the simple point is that they're forcing Americans to invest in failing Israeli financial bonds and failing. I mean, losing money, despite the fact that these companies have a fiduciary responsibility to make money, and they're losing money, and they know they are, and they're forcing you to reinvest in it to support Israel. Just violating blatant laws in front of you in order to make sure Israel doesn't fail. That's the way. That is like a perfect overview of where we are in the world right now. They know they're breaking the law. They're willing to do it in plain daylight because Israel needs to succeed. And then when you call it out, well, somehow this rationalization about fighting evil or whatever it is, when they're the ones literally committing genocide. Anyway, point is to make sure you understand this, the infiltration of even the financial side of it, that Americans are suffering, not just because Trump and the government are selling you out, or to Biden, but because they're being sold out to a foreign power who is actively fighting against American interests. Now, on the $2,000 point, oh, wait. Oh, that's interesting. I think I mixed these up. Oh, I'm going to come back to this, actually. I forgot that I put this, I will come back to it in a second. I wanted to include the $2,000 mortgage, 50-year mortgage kind of overlap to all this. Let me make sure I mixed, here, let me, real quick. I guess I forgot to move those around. Next, we're going to get into the January 6th. And the Blaze report and what this means. Let me just organize this really quickly. There we go. Okay. Now, just in case you saw that, the point is simply that, Trump, it's kind of, I really could just continue that point right there of, being sold out, being claimed we're doing things. Here's a 50-year mortgage. You'll own nothing and be happy. Exactly. Here's $2,000. Here's some crumbs with everything we've taken from you. Are you okay? It's like, it's just clearly, it's an insult to intelligent people. It's an insult, but we'll come back to that because I'm going to end with a very important point about the, Candace Owens and plenty of others that are just going, Trump has sold us out. Candace just made a very, very public statement in a video about that. Piers Morgan talking about it. That's making some big people very unhappy. But before we get to that, you might have seen this reporting, and I want to juxtapose this with Kash Patel, Michigan, FBI. It's pretty weird what's going on right now. Now, this story. We've talked about this a lot. Now, Blaze Media did a report on this in regard to basically one new element. I shouldn't say only one new element. There's parts that have come up new from like when we last covered this, but one part that's like the reason this is coming out, which is that they claim they have a 94 to 98% match on the gait, the walk of the person they claim is the bomber, which I think we should stand back and consider the entire thing might be one large. I think that from my perspective. I'm not of the mind this is the Democrats trapping the Republicans. I mean, in some element that exists because not everyone's in the know. But I think all of this is in the interest of the government controlling your life. And that's why Pelosi's not in jail. That's why I don't think any of them are going to go to jail. That has to matter right now. They would be in jail with what they already claim they know if there was real effort to put these people behind bars. But that aside from whether or not this, and I'll point to it again, that I think this is one larger thing, but just taking it from within the conversation, right? That this was a potential manipulation to trap the Republicans, which from an individual perspective, I do believe that. MAGA wearing hat Republicans were your side, by the way, and the government was trying to trap you in that whole scenario. That's what I believe. And you can quite frankly prove that. But this overlaps with an interesting point where it turns out that this person who was there that day, who was in Capitol Police, who now works for the CIA, who was from Ukraine, interesting overlaps and all, but it could just be coincidence. We'll go through it, was the person that they say matches the gait of the bomber. All this does is explode open the real point that if this was a Capitol Police who literally went out and placed these bombs in order to create the idea that this was a larger event, you could, one of two ways you look at that. That's Democrats trying to frame Republicans, which is the easiest low-hanging fruit, but very much could be the case. Or it's just a larger government agenda to create the air that that's happening, to use the two-party division to achieve what they're still trying to achieve now, which is censorship, control of our rights, Second Amendment, free speech, everything. You can consider for yourself. Here's what the report says. A forensic analysis of a female former U.S. Capitol Police officer, and her gait is a 94 to 98% match to the unique stride of a long-sought January 6 pipe bomb suspect, according to a Blaze News investigation confirmed by several intelligence sources. Which, as far as I'm concerned, from Blaze or any other mainstream platform, confirmed by several sources doesn't mean anything unless you can verify that for yourself. A source close to a congressional investigation of January 6th additionally told Blaze News evidence has told Blaze News evidence has emerged recently that pointed toward law enforcement possibly being involved in the planting of the pipe bombs. So you can read through this for yourself. I recommend you do. Some of it's interesting. This is an agent of the, if you know my skepticism, I think all of us should have about the FBI, whether it's Biden or Trump or Kash or whoever else, Ray, The FBI is literally, I think its core job is to set these things up. And so here we are where we have another agent who's saying, Kirchhoff, who was a Capitol Police officer for 4.5 years. I'm sorry, this wasn't the agent part. So this is another officer who was involved with this. They get into the FBI and the Capitol and the Secret Service, by the way, who all of which feel that this was sort of a setup. It says, who was a Capitol Police officer, he says, left the department in mid-2021 for a security detail at the CIA. Oh, I'm sorry. I already just had that. I just didn't jump down far enough. The point was that this person, sorry, I'm being confusing. The woman you're looking at for the podcast, the woman they claim is the potential pipe bomber, her name was Kirchhoff, and left the Capitol Police after this to go work for the CIA. I find that just almost too much. But then it goes on to say the residents appeared to be under the watch of law enforcement officers on Friday night. Blaze News editor-in-chief Christopher Bedford was pulled over by a police officer after stopping to observe the home. He was then allowed to leave. So something's going on around this right now in the watching of the house. It says the FBI, which failed to solve the case in nearly 5 years of investigation, but indicated that it was closing in after Blaze News brought its investigation to intelligence sources. So basically, Blaze News is the one finding out and informing the FBI. It seems like a weird thing to happen. And it says, they were feet from the Falls Church address of the pipe bomb suspect days after January 6th. There's just this weird overlap. I don't know how we take A's at face value. Whether it's a Capitol Police member or a former or an FBI or a Secret Service, they're all people that are literally tapped into the structure who are now telling you retroactively parts of the story. Now, consider them. Always question everything, consider all possibilities. But I'm very skeptical about the point of, it's always about trying to use the current momentum. But it says the former FBI Special Agent Kyle Seraphin realized Friday that he was doing surveillance next door to the woman now suspected of being a January 6th pipe bomber. What a coincidence. So you're doing a totally separate thing. This Blaze News comes out and they go, oh my God, she's right there next door. Seems weird. It says the FBI put us one door away from the pipe bomber within days of January 6th, and we were deliberately pulled out of pulled for no logical or logically investigative reason. And everything about this that tells me that they were involved in a cover-up. So again, see that kind of a statement. Well, I mean, that could indicate that surely, but that wouldn't mean you then automatically assume it's a grand cover-up. I mean, I do think there's a lot of that happening. Feels, like you're driving what you want to tell people. The forensic study arranged by Blaze revealed that Kirchhoff is up to 98% match of the gate of the pipe bomber. Now, it's interesting to find out what that overlap would be. Is it possible other people can have similar gates? It is a pretty specific thing if you look into it. But the findings were confirmed by several current intelligence sources who viewed the study results. I guess. When Jones goes, my big sources, who knows? Maybe they're not even there. I just don't trust any of these people when they point to something you can't verify. And also because they're very partisan and very subjective when it comes to that kind of a game. Anyway, you can read through all of this. The point is it comes down to them saying that they, were investigating this. They were shut down. She was one of the ones that were shooting, the pepper balls and more somewhat overlapping lethal things at people that were there. There's the overlap of the person. And here's the image of the pipe bomb. They claim was reduced in quality, so it was harder to see. I mean, guys, these things that happen every time. I've seen 3 examples of just in the Trump administration, this second one, multiple times where they've released information like Kash Patel and been caught for it. Yeah, so I mean, the only last point I think was, it says 13 months before taking office as FBI director, Kash Patel seemed to raise the possibility that the pipe bombs were fakes. And by the way, you take a look at these things. That was one of the leading ideas. These things look ridiculous to me. Now, these can very well be real, but a kitchen timer, people made fun of this when this looks like duct tape wires and a timer. So certainly could be real. Now seems to be what they're arguing, but it's kind of a weird change from what was there before. Now, he said they were fake before, like he said that the Epstein files were going to come out. But he says, if the allegations about the bomber aren't true, Patel says, on the Benny Johnson show, where all the big important news comes out, he says, or there was some government ruse or some FBI rogue source or whatever. I don't know because I don't have the case files. Then there's another corruption scandal on and around the election time narrative. Okay, so now you've had the case files since January, or, that a little bit after that. Nothing's happened. So this arguably was they were already aware of most of this other than, I guess, the gate analysis, but they've now given it to them. How long do they know this? How long has this been up in the air? Apparently, this has been going on for a month. So Other than, please read through this for more of the nuanced subjective points. For me, the forensic match is the gait of the way they were walking, which I argue is somewhat subjective at the end of the day, but it is, there is a science behind it. But isn't it possible that this is something that's also being kind of organized in that direction? So to be clear, if you haven't seen this already, I'm very adamant about my opinion on this, and I think it's easily proven. January 6th was a very clear government operation. Doesn't mean every part of it, doesn't mean every single thing was included, but you can literally prove how this went down, overlapping with government sources. Now we know the FBI agents, we have the naval aspects of it, we have all sorts of things we've proven over the years. And Sergei Beninin, who is a Ukrainian Azov movement element, who's right there next to Jake Chansley, who was screaming things in Russian, or the people that were part of a left-wing group that were on video going, we tricked them, we got it. I have to bring this up every time. So the point is, don't think for a second that I'm arguing this is not necessarily a larger thing. My point is to wonder why now, and in this very overlap, if this does turn out to be something more, the interesting connection, as Emily's pointing out, to the very people we're talking about. Right? So this person says her family's from Ukraine, that she works for the CIA, or at least she did. Tells you everything you need to know. That's the alleged January 6th pipe bomber firing at the beginning of the Capitol Police response to the Peace Memorial gate breach. And Ukraine has an interest in seeing Biden take the White House, this person writes, which, that's a partisan perspective for sure. But I think it's interesting to recognize all the people that were involved. And on top of that, that to this very day, these things don't get discussed by left or right. Truly. Now, Thomas Massey seems to feel there's something to this. He says, this is the biggest scandal of my lifetime. Steve Baker did what an $11 billion agency, the FBI, could not do. Or worse yet, covered up. He identified the January 6th pipe bomber, and she wasn't working alone. Now, I'm not going to say we know that for a fact. I haven't personally gone through and vetted the gate analysis that they've conducted, and now asking the government who lies to you like they're breathing. I'm going to need a hell of a lot more to make this case, but it seems to point in the right direction to me. And overall, it's the idea that I think comes out of this, that why hasn't the FBI done this, whether before or Kash Patel? I mean, really take a second to think about if this, because the bigger picture we're going to get into is whether it's Pelosi or Bill Gates or Klaus Schwab or any of it. No one has gone to jail. No one. So why would this be any different? And so here's Steve Baker from The Blaze, who breaks this down. You can read it for yourself. Thomas Massey then says again later in the day, or the next day, America's waking up today to learn that Capitol Police turned CIA orchestrated, the pipe bombs on January 6th, and the FBI has covered up for 4 years. That's into Kash Patel, mind you. He says, I questioned FBI Director Wray, ATF Director Diddlebach, and FBI Assistant Director under oath, and they all played dumb. Oh, and let's not forget this. It's just that he tagged Kash Patel in this, right? And says Kash Patel needs to make a statement tomorrow when this breaks. He did not. This is on the 7th. It's the 9th. And he hasn't even addressed this yet, as far as I can tell. Not that he has to respond, but it's a big deal. And it seems to be something his own team very much wants to know more about, and it seems he's doing nothing about it. This says their own article admits the FBI was complicit from day one. So why on earth would they not release everything now instead of giving the FBI time to bury the truth? Right. I'll review all the evidence with an open mind, but this stinks of corruption from the start. Now, the question is whether or not, what's happening right now with the current Trump administration FBI? Because what the investigation seems to show is that they have had this the entire time. Not the gate overlap, but all the information. By the way, again, we already know that there was more to this story. And it says Steve Baker is an honest man, Thomas Massey writes, though through and through. I'm not going to say I agree with that. I'm not even saying, I'm not going to state that I think someone is absolutely honest. I don't know that. I'm not sure I'm that familiar with Steve Baker from The Blaze. He says the question is, why didn't Kash Patel uncover this, and why did he try to prevent its release? I agree with that. I guess we'll find out. This is just humorous to me. This is a Republican side supporting platform, 311,000 followers. And it says, if the FBI can't, quote, find the January 6th pipe bomber because it was busy covering it up, does that mean the FBI can't find Charlie Kirk's real killer either? They've lost their support, guys. He says, I don't care who hears it, but I trust Kash Patel no more than I trusted Christopher Wray. Zero trust. See, this is what an honest person, I'm not going to say that I can prove Red Pill USA is honest, but my point is, in a general sense, an honest person will be able to say, I support Trump, but I don't support his choice right there. I support Trump, but I don't support Kash Patel. But see, you get the Cat Turds and the Benny Johnsons or Nick Sorters that will scream down your throat about how you're not MAGA because you don't choose the side. And it says the entire FBI needs to be splintered into 1,000 pieces and scattered into the winds. I agree. Thomas Massey says, unbelievable. Former FBI in charge of January 6th investigation tells me phone data that could have been used to identify the person who placed the bomb on January 5th was, quote, corrupted. Thank you, Darren Beatty, excuse me, whose groundbreaking reporting and help was used to formulate my questions. Now, this is a clip from 2023 of Thomas Massey talking about this on Fox News. Funny to think about as well, what Fox News, the kind of questions they're asking now. And my point, if this was the other way around, you think Ingram would be asking questions that probe into what the Trump administration was doing? I just think it's always funny to consider that.
It could.
Oh, that's right. I got to come back to that.
I got to turn now to January 6th because we still have no idea who placed that pipe bomb, the pipe bombs near the DNC and RNC headquarters the night before. And today you sent a letter to the FBI director, Wray. Well, what's in that letter and what do you expect to hear from him at this point?
Well, Jim Jordan and I had a chance to interview the guy who was in charge of the D.C. field office, who was in charge of finding out who this pipe bomber was. And it turns out we're 900 days later. They don't have a suspect. And I think one of the biggest things that I learned in this interview with him was that the phone data was corrupted.
So first and foremost, guys, right, is that right there you understand that this information, there was more to this. So you have to acknowledge if you're looking at the full picture, that the Biden administration chose to not pursue this lead. Now, why would that be? Now, it could mean that's because this was a Capitol Police member they were working with and later joined the CIA, or it could be something else. We shouldn't assume just because that connects that's the answer. But it's very interesting how that lines up. Right. And so now there's more coming out. And here's even Thomas Massey saying back then that they had this information, 2023. So it's not just Trump. It's not just Biden, guys. It's the U.S. government and their willingness to lie to you for their own interests.
I asked him, I said, so, we saw on the video the suspect the night before who you think planted the bomb. We saw them use a phone a few times. How did you use the phone data? And he said, basically, well, you're not going to believe this. He even used the word conspiracy theory. He didn't want to tell us because he thought it would fuel more conspiracy theories, that they went to the phone providers and the data was corrupted.
This is like Epstein's camera was not working right in the cell,
Keystone
right?
cops or something.
Now we have the ability, as we saw in January 6th when they were looking over people's bank records, geo-fencing them, tracking them with their cell phone tracking technology, and no suspects? So it's all because...
Don't miss the Ingram point, right? Well, we used it all then. Let's use it now, right? So you criticize that against Republicans, right? Didn't the Democrats use all their invasive surveillance tactics to track it down, just like they're using right now against every American claiming they're looking for immigrants? And the point was, why can't we use that? With the implication being it's a Democrat thing we're going after now. So as always, guys, people trapped in the partisanship are willing to do the bad thing to the other side when it suits their interests. And back and forth, you put them together, and guess what? Now every side supports the problem. As long as it's being done against the bad guys, which is the other side, and it's always the other side. I mean, it's just such a simple, basic reality that always comes to pass, whether it's, COVID-19 or anything else, right? They come together and achieve the end while pointing at each other.
That technology was not working properly, and we have cameras in every inch of Capitol Hill, every single inch.
That is what he claims. The geofence data was corrupted.
Oh, how convenient.
Okay, the other question that I asked him was, could these bombs have gone off? I asked him to explain to me how a 1-hour kitchen timer could...
Okay, to my point before, would Laura Ingraham now say how convenient? Right now, if it was Trump's administration and Kash Patel sitting there, would she now go, oh, how convenient? Why don't you find it now? How much you want to bet she would not do that? How much you want to bet she would be giving you another narrative that makes it seem like they're not responsible? You know how this works, guys. That's Fox, CNN, mainstream alternative media. It's what they do. But still a valid point now. It should be the same point should apply today.
Properly, and we have cameras in every inch.
Okay, the other question that I asked him was, could these bombs have gone off? I asked him to explain to me how a 1-hour kitchen timer can set a bomb off 17 hours later.
Think about how dumb that is. So I agree, just like I did last time, that the logical reality of this is that this was a psychological operation.
And he admitted for the first time, and this contradicts what he said in the media before, that it couldn't. And then the other thing that
So it wouldn't have, right? So the person planting that bomb in that white jacket was likely aware that that thing was not real or wasn't going to blow up, right? So that would make it much less of a severe crime, right? It's more of a do this for the American, do this for your do this patriot for your government to go get the bad MAGA Nazis who are trying to overthrow the government, whatever the momentum is, or do this and you can join the CIA, right? That's not that far-fetched, guys.
I asked him was, given all these coincidences, wouldn't the people who discovered the bombs be suspects? Since the bombs were basically inert and then they were found within 20 minutes of the first breach of the Capitol, both bombs, he said, that's investigation.
Yeah, think about how weird that is, right? What timing to seek out and find those things unrelated to where you currently were. Suddenly it relates to the January 6th point.
Investigation 101. Yes, both of those people would be suspects. I said, who found the second bomb? He said, I don't know. I said, do you have any video? He doesn't know. We've got video at the Capitol that I've reviewed. I think we've got video of who found the second bomb, and we're going to be back to the FBI and say, why didn't you follow up with this person?
And that's
we can hit the home plate at Yankee Stadium from outer space, but we can't find the one guy. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Ingram. Now make that today when Cash is on your show. How much you want to bet that doesn't happen? The point is, Massey very clearly is laying out the reality. In 2023, so right then, that's Biden administration. Ray failing or covering it up. 100%. Then, or at least in the context of, I can't speak to their intentions, but the point is that Massey brought it in, nothing happened. Okay. Now Cash comes in. That's still there. Just like the Epstein point. Nothing changed. He's speaking, what'd he say about them? We're going to get to the bottom of this when I get into power. Nothing. Is Pelosi in jail? No, nothing. Nobody. Not one person. That speaks volumes. Now you look like people would love to say, maybe tomorrow. Maybe don't rush him, Ryan. He's going through all the Sure. Fantastic. When it happens, then you can give him credit for it. Up until then, when nothing is happening, it's obviously in your interest to go, why isn't anything happening? As opposed to going, yay, team. Well, here is an example of people who are calling this out from all different angles, but this is by the way, funny, showing a little clip of Lindsey Graham walking by and fist bumping Kamala Harris, which is perfect. But the point is, you want your blood to boil? He writes, Lindsey Graham told Capitol Police, you've got guns, use them. Michael Byrd then shot and killed Ashley Babbitt. Hours later, Graham stood before Congress and said, enough is enough, count me out. And when the election was certified, he fist bumped Kamala Harris on the Senate floor. Let that sink in. He was in on it. Their opinion. But yes, it's very much a two-party illusion. And if you still can't see that, I don't know what else to show you. Now, watch these shows if you want to get into this into the original overlap. There's plenty of stuff that's come up since then. And just search January 6th tab on TLAV for more of what we've covered. But there's plenty out there that have covered this extensively. January 6th was always a very clear government operation. Before that, we covered it on the 2022, January 6th. The failed false flag meant to blame Russia and you using the CIA-grown Azov battalion. It was a very specific focal point of the whole thing. And of course, Whitney and I talked about this in 2022. Whitney Webb interviewed January 6th, Azov Battalion, and the war on domestic terrorism, or rather, on you. Now, where that goes, and I'll follow up in regard to what comes of that report, and hopefully send me things if you guys see it too. But do you think anything's going to happen? I mean, do you really think that they're going to follow up and go after this person who connects back to the FBI or the CIA? I mean, I'd like to believe so. Nobody's above the law, right, Kash Patel? But I doubt it will happen. Now, what's actually happening, right? So as that's going on, where are the Epstein files, right? Where are all the Democrat operatives that you said were going to get arrested? What about the Social Security theft? What about Doge and all the illegal funding? What about on and on and on and on? Yeah, but nobody's been arrested. Okay, maybe it's all coming down. This was on the 3rd of November. The war-focused peace president, Gaza AI drones now surveilling U.S. cities, which is happening. And of course, Kash Patel's FBI false flag, which is what I very much think is going on here. We're also going to make a point toward the end, or I think somewhere in here about I think that's actually right now. I moved it up here because it relates to the insanely insulting thing of supporting the ISIS connected linked, or, the Al-Qaeda leader in Syria, who is the same thing we're talking about while acting like you're fighting the same thing. Even though what seems to be is you framing a couple of Muslims to go after the whole thing. My opinion, because again, they've yet to lead. I mean, I really want to see this actual, the conversation. I want to see the chats that they claim add up to them going wink, wink. We're going to like basically going pumpkin and good deeds and, training with guns. I mean, that means terrorism. It's wild to see what they claim means something. We'll go through right now. To me, without seeing more of this, it's very suspicious where they're at. But as I said, maybe if they produce a whole lot more evidence, I'll be the first to say, yeah, it looks like that adds up. At the moment, with their track record and what they're currently doing, it does not feel right. So here is one of the follow-ups. All right, this was on the 6th. I just thought this image was funny. It's crazy. People left and right are kind of calling this guy out. But he says, update on the alleged foiled terrorist attack. There's now been 6 people that have been arrested. Now, to break it down in the kind of quickly over the last shows, originally it was 2 people. Or I think it was 2 or 3. 2 originally were the main focus in Dearborn, Michigan. Now, they've arrested more after that in different places, some in New Jersey. They're trying to make this, we're going to get into it now. They're claiming it's an ISIS network through all these places based on, almost entirely subjective information. Again, at least what they're showing so far. But in the beginning, the 2 people in Dearborn, I think, were the focal point. And everything comes back to the fact that they are, just because they have guns and they had something they were going to do on Halloween, referencing Pumpkin Day, that therefore that means they were planning an ISIS attack because they claim there are links to ISIS groups that they've yet to prove. And on top of that they claim that because of all these things we know are happening, that's why these words are all dangerous. That's why having the gun is terrorism, because he's linked to this thing we can't prove right now. And so overall, what it seems like to me, like with Dallas, if you remember, you had 2 guys, which, by the way, I forgot to look into that. Damn, I was going to overlap it today. I don't want to break off now. But let me know in the chat what's going on with the Dallas shooting with the FBI, right? The reality, or rather, it was the ICE location. What's important is that the 2 people they claim were the ones that they're charging it with like support the same way they're doing now, arguably had nothing to do with this that they can prove. There was one guy who very well could be a CIA agent for all we know, a Mossad agent or anything else, who simply was the one that shot and took off. And they claim that these 2 helped him. Now, right now, they're going, we didn't have anything to do with that. And the evidence doesn't even suggest they're connected. This could be overall, it's up in the air like this one is, and I've yet to see it flesh out. Let me know if there's any update in the chat, if you guys see anything. But so that very well could be that they all planned it together, right? They could all 3 plan this and they just got caught. Very much a possibility. But with everything else we keep seeing, or like some of these largest assassination stories of the past, it turns out to be somebody who carries it out and somebody who gets blamed for it. And it's very easy to see how this works. They've done the FBI has a track record of literally manufacturing events. The New York Times has covered it. So my point is, coming to now, we got 6 different people. There seems to be one main guy that seems to be the focal point of the one connected to ISIS. Now, if you can't prove that guy is actually connected to these first 2 guys in Michigan, just that he was in a chat room and they were talking about things, this seems to be manufactured. And their lawyers, the one saying that there's literally nothing to go on with this. But a lawyer would say that if he's defending his people. But he says now on the 6th that they have an update on the alleged foiled terrorist attack. They've got 6 people connected to the case. He says this time out of Washington State. Washington. So New Jersey, Washington, and Michigan. Because this was another individual allegedly providing material support inspired by ISIS. I mean, the idea that you have ISIS inspired, what? It just feels flimsy on its face. What are we talking about? A group that literally, by the way, is a created, operated, owned, manipulated, funded, armed by all the elements we're talking about. That's not every single faction, and who knows whether they even lost control today. But the reality of it, from Corbett's work, from Ben Swan, from the documentaries, from the source material, they are the ones arming, moving, and working with these groups. Israel more than anybody, it seems. So the idea that you're saying so inspired by a U.S. intelligence, Israel intelligence operative asset, well, that's interesting to think about. But on top of that, we're saying that they were looking at that propaganda and going, I want to just randomly go kill people? Like, it just feels empty. I mean, yeah, maybe they were watching propaganda. Maybe they were hopped up on antidepressants and didn't know any better. I mean, that doesn't then make it okay. But it's not as simple as just they were radicalized by evil ideas. What does that amount to? Well, you need to control ideas. Always. Partners continue to do an outstanding job. That's what he says. So he retweeted this. This is from the 3rd. And it's just kind of, it's out there right now. His whole account is all about pointing back to this story. So the FBI, with how much the director has to do, this is the one thing, the only thing, find that very ridiculous. the criminal complaint unsealed this morning, and it is still, as of right now, a criminal complaint. It's the weirdest thing in the world to go back and forth with Grok, because Grok just seems to intent on trying to convince you that there's indictments, that if there have not been indictments. There's been a criminal complaint complaints for everybody involved. There is no indictments. There's no pleas. This has not gone to court yet because there's no indictments yet, which means it might not go anywhere. Now, criminal complaints are just allegations. Same with indictments, by the way, but indictments have a different level. Both basically that begins the charges into a court process. They have to state a plea. In this case, they're just criminal complaints, which means it could go nowhere. It's an investigation. But my point is, you ask Grok and they'll go, yes, indictments. Even BBC and a few others were forced to retract that because they also said indictments. It just shows you how prolific these nonsensical lies go. Right out of the gate, I said that's not true. But it says they revealed detailed investigation that had been taking place for months with evidence showing subjects allegedly discussing details, plans for committing a terrorist attack. Now, it's insane that this is how you're framing this. If you actually even read, like we will, what they say, it's all you get is quotes around specific buzzwords. No actual quotes of what they were saying, no actual exchange, like give me an image of the actual back and forth. I want to see what they said, what the context was, and what they meant. I bet you that never even comes out. Because if all you want to say is these people had guns and here they reference pumpkin, that's how we know it was a terrorist attack, which is basically what you're getting, that doesn't mean anything to me. That means you guys are claiming you knew that based on the word pumpkin. Now, I don't think it's as simple as that. But discussing detailed plans for an attack has yet to actually materialize. Not to say it's not there. They've yet to prove that. And it says sharing pro-ISIS material on social media. Again, a baseless claim from people like Kash Patel who have been caught lying. Encouraging violent attacks. Not as far as I can tell. These are statements made based on subjective, tangential information that might, in some cases, I'll show you, aren't even connected to the people they're talking about. Purchasing a shotgun. Right. Okay. So owning tactical gear, shotgun, which half of this country owns, is apparently now makes you a terrorist if you talk about pumpkins and own a gun. It says, and more, all of which matches exactly what Kash Patel and the FBI said. That's all just kind of rehashing. There, this is the story. Everyone loves to parrot what the team says. Well, here he comes out on the 7th after, look at his account. He's already shared this. He's already posted this. So this is the PR marketing Trump administration. You just point to another article and go, the thing, right? The thing right there. And then the thing that they said, just showing here's what Fox said about me. Well, you already reported this story, man. What else are you doing? What about the Epstein files? What about, is that the only investigation you have ongoing? And look, Twitter, they don't have to post everything they do, but Kash seems very intent on trying to convince you that he's doing things. And yet this is the only thing he's talking about. Maybe because he doesn't want to let you know that he's not investigating January 6th or Pelosi or any of them. The Michigan terror case, now I guess it's no longer alleged now, shows exactly why vigilance matters, he says, praising himself. That's what Trump has taught them. These suspects weren't acting alone. They were radicalized, seeking guidance from extremists tied to ISIS ideology. See, somebody told him to shift the tone. At first, he was going, the alleged thing that we can't, because that's the reality. No one's been charged. No one's been indicted, or rather found guilty of a crime, not indicted. They've only been criminal complaints. The investigation's ongoing. Nobody's actually been found guilty, but now suddenly it's a terror case, and we know that they were acting alone. They were connected to terrorism, ISIS ideology. The tweet he put out first about there being international connections and weapons training, he deleted that because it was ridiculous when compared to the facts. He was very clearly painting what he wanted you to see as some larger network. Clearly, my point is, over the 5th to the 7th, somebody said, shift your tone. Just like Bondi and Nome and all the rest do. State it as a fact, because that's what they do. He says, this FBI and our fantastic partner stopped another potential massacre. So we're told. Michigan terror suspects got advice from ISIS supporting preacher's dad. Remember, we talked about this already. I told you this is where it's going. Here's the article. New York Post. So Michigan terror suspects, funny how, you just absolutely made it sound on the 7th like they were guilty and you knew, got advice from ISIS supporting preacher's dad. I mean, just on its face, think how stupid this is. Everyone in the world knows that you guys are surveilling these chat rooms, and everyone knows this, guys. Now, none of them is smart enough to know that, like to consciously be aware of that, but it's pretty public knowledge. On top of that, we know that there was 2 FBI agents involved in this, one early on and one even before that, based on the later reporting. So for all we know, they literally manufactured this, which is what it seems like, because nothing actually happened. No event was carried out. So if nothing happened and you're arresting them for something you started to plan, what are we talking about? The FBI is what we're talking about. That's what they do. But in this case, somebody jumps in a chat room and you're discussing a terror plot, And it's okay. A random stranger jumps in and goes, hey, let me join your terror plot. It just doesn't seem like it makes any sense at all, but certainly possible. And then you're telling us that they reach out on the record on a public exchange to an ISIS supporting they claim as an ISIS terrorist and go, hey, give us some advice on this terror plot. I mean, doesn't this just seem ridiculous? Well, it seems like kind of the stuff you get from people that are out of their depth. But it says, now, I mean, you clearly get my opinion, but I want to stress again, it's my opinion. A suspect accused of plotting the Michigan Halloween terror attack allegedly, quote, allegedly. So an alleged plot that we don't know when, how, or what was going to happen. That was their own statement. We don't know where it'll happen. We don't know what they're planning. We don't know when it will happen. When, where, how. But you know it was going to happen. I mean, again, that's what direct quote from the FBI. And then, so an event that you didn't know when, where, or how it was going to take place, they got allegedly a guidance from somebody about that thing you didn't know was going to happen. So what in this is actually verified? What if this entire conversation is something that you actually monitored and verified? It's all alleged and hypothetical and maybe. And this is a terror plot that you've stopped? And it says sought guidance on when to carry out the violence from the father of a local extremist Islamic preacher who has previously called on American Muslims to wage jihad. This is the clumsiest effort, in my opinion. Now, not to say that there weren't efforts to do this. When this comes to pass and we can prove this, we'll come back to it. But this seems flimsy as hell. The idea, first of all, carry out the violence, which, by the way, nothing happened. It's all hypothetical based on what they claim were code words. So how exactly do you truly know that was what was going to come to pass? Secondarily, a local extremist preacher, which, as we'll show you, is a person who's very prominent. You support him or not, it's up to you. The reality is he's got a very large following. London tried to claim he was the it says London attacker followed an ISIS recruiter and radical U.S. preacher, Ahmed Musa Jibril. It gets the father and the younger person are all part of, bottom line is if you look into this, like I always do, what you get are subjective overlaps. The idea he's an ISIS recruiter is a completely intelligence-related government opinion. Here's just Grok, for example. Does this person on YouTube call for violence? Generally asking Grok. And the simple point is, no, he does not explicitly call for violence. But if you read it all for yourself, and it says explicitly for a reason, in no way is he going, do this, do that. The end point comes down to the fact that he's a Muslim and that he talks about the word jihad. And this is what we always discuss. As he says, promotion of jihad as a concept. He frequently glorifies jihad as a religious duty. Because if you understand the word, now look, could he mean violence? Of course he could. But it's like saying the word revolution or struggle automatically means terrorism. That's how dumb this is, because jihad is a word that means struggle. And it can mean something. A jihad can be a personal struggle with your religious beliefs. A jihad could mean protesting against people who are suppressing Muslim beliefs. A jihad could mean carry out a violent attack. Right? So could a struggle or a revolution. Like I've said 1,000 times, you could call it the American jihad, the American, what's the other word I always use? Anyway, the point is that has the same overlapping meaning. For them to say that this guy calling for a jihad means violence does not track. Some people can say that and they could mean that. Other people can say it like a person who, if you look at the content, seems to be preaching about Muslim values. Now, look, the idea that you think a Muslim is the problem, that's the crux of this issue. Now, if this turns out to be a terror attack and this guy was absolutely part of it, then good, prove it, and we'll break it down. But what I see is a bunch of connective tissue between a bunch of arguments, that we have a person who is a Muslim who they've later claimed is a violent person because he says words that connect with Muslim ideology and says the word jihad, and everything Muslim is now a problem because think it's people losing the plot here. Look into this for yourself. Don't take my word for it. I'm not completely, I'm not a follower of this person's content. I simply did research on him before I did this show. But here are some examples. Raise children with love of jihad, right? So you could pretend that means go out and murder people, or you could pretend what it means is raise children with the love of struggling for their beliefs. That's what that actually means, which, again, saying it just like that, struggling for your beliefs, you could argue means carrying out a violent attack if somebody thought that way. But it says jihad against the senile Pharaoh Biden. Again, struggle politically. Or you can argue he means terrorism. But to prove this is what matters. Where if this guy was literally screeched on YouTube going, go carry out terrorist attacks, pretty sure YouTube wouldn't let him be on the platform. But I wouldn't assume that either. Emotive support for armed opposition. Right. Okay. Same point as always. Armed And just like with Israel and Hamas and Gaza, people who are illegally occupied, which is what this is about, have the legal right to armed resistance. Or the idea that because somebody is a Muslim, therefore armed resistance is always terrorism, right? So the idea that people were resisting in the revolution against Britain, does that make them terrorists? Because, it's such a subjective thing. But you can read through this for yourself. You can recognize that it comes down to ideas that they don't like, that they claim also mean that. It's like saying Palestine should be free means you hate Jewish people. That's the dumbest thing in the conversation, and this is exactly what we're talking about. So when you're accusing the extremist preacher, that's what that comes back to. Now, these people are Muslims. This person is a prominent preacher in the area. So if they were to call and ask about something, well, what they say matters, doesn't it? So it says Muhammad Ali, 20, and an unnamed juvenile had a conversation last week about reaching out to the father of so-called Islamic ideologue to ask for advice on a timing for a, quote, good deed. Okay. So maybe they're trying to be secretive with their language because they're planning a terror attack. Or maybe they're reaching out to a preacher about carrying out if you understand the Muslim religion, if you talk to Robert about the reality of this is a constant thing in their lives, and asking the preacher for guidance on what that should be. I'm not saying I know that, but you have to understand, if all you have are pumpkin and good deed, and then other things that Americans have a right to do, and just because they slant it with the idea that all of this means terrorism, if this holds up in a court of law and this is all there is, then we're lost. Because this is subjective connecting of dots that don't seem to exist as it stands now. And it's the fifth time I'm going to stress that, because I don't want it to be taken as I know for a fact, because I don't. We have to be objective about this all the time. Now it says the feds didn't specifically identify the Islamic ideologue, which is interesting to me. Why wouldn't they? But it says, but described a research paper on radicalization that clearly named the radical preacher as ISIS supporter. So this is the thing. They call him that. As far as I can tell, that's not the reality, but they say that. So that becomes the reality. And it says, according to the court filing. Okay. Jibril's father, who was also isn't named in the complaint, founded a mosque in Dearborn, Michigan. Right, because we know Muslims and mosques are evil and bad, right? So therefore, that makes the case, doesn't it? Now it says, and for those that don't know the show, please understand that was being sarcastic. The juvenile is said to have called the preacher's father on October 29th to tell him he intended to do a good deed, but was unsure of what day to do it. Yeah, I mean, you could try to always make this sound sneaky and wrong, but without all the context and the actual chat, you don't know, do you? You get things quoted out of context, or rather in the context they want you to see it as. The preacher dad then allegedly told the juvenile that he shouldn't wait and to carry out the deed. So if he was talking about going out and, serving soup at a soup kitchen, well, that's not very dangerous, isn't it? But if what he's saying is hurry up and go kill those people, well, that becomes bad, doesn't it? This is why things need to be proven. What they're doing right now is trying to convince you in the court of public opinion. There is no suggestion that the preacher's dad was aware of the alleged plot. Not even by them, by the way. Still, it says so you're using him to make an ISIS connection, but then claiming he didn't even know what was happening. Still, the FBI alleged the pair went on to use the guidance, despite them claiming he wasn't even involved, to forge ahead with the plans for the attack, according to the complaint. Right, the good deed to be carried on Pumpkin Day. It's all super nefarious. Now, it says the younger Jibril has a history of spewing hate-filled sermons, according to them. Now, you could argue that what our left-right paradigm does every day. Look at what they're saying about each other in the current literal left-right paradigm of this country. It's full of vitriolic hatred and just venom, excuse me. So the idea that you could argue hate-filled sermons, who knows? Probably. People are out there all hyped up on all sorts of things, religion, politics, but that doesn't mean they're terrorists. And it says the preacher also previously called on Muslims in the U.S. to wage jihad against the infidel West and for followers to turn away from what he described as a watered-down American Zionist Islam that ignores the idea of jihad. Again, I caution you, avid readers of New York Post probably don't care about the nuance of the word. The truth is, it does not mean what they keep claiming it does. It could, as one of the many meanings. The reality is, in most Muslims' lives, it simply means a struggle for what they believe in. And it gets abused every single day. In fact, if you understand where the whole Muslim suicide vest jihad bomber comes from, it comes from Zionism. And that's what this always comes back to. In fact, I'll play that really quickly, because it's important to understand the truth. That doesn't mean there aren't people that carry out attacks of their own accord, right? But it's important to understand All of this stems from an effort to convince you of exactly what they're trying to accomplish today.
The Zionists have used it and brought it, in fact, to the area. Terrorism, as we know it today, the planting of bombs in marketplaces and so on and so forth, was, in fact, introduced into the Middle East by the Zionists in the 20s. But the net result of Zionist terrorism and violence in the first third of the 20th century has brought forth, to my mind, the anomaly, the horrific and unacceptable status in the Middle East today of the State of Israel, which is in fact an armed garrison state, which now exports more arms and distributes violence all around the world, vastly disproportionate to its size. I mean, in that respect, I think it's a horrible cycle of violence. But in it all, I think the Palestinian is the victim. There's no question about that.
It's just time to be honest about all this stuff, right? Now, so the point is he's saying jihad against the West. Now, you could argue, again, as always, I'll make this point 75 times, that means violence. Or you could argue it means a struggle against what the West is doing to the Muslim religion, which we can all see right now. You can literally see what Elon Musk and the governments are doing with their like rabid, just disgusting hatred of certain kinds of people. Look at Laura Loomer. Look at the rest of these people and what they're trying to, like people that are saying that Muslims shouldn't be allowed in Congress. There's no misunderstanding what that means. They mean that every Muslim is bad. And just think about how disgusting that is. That's just the same as saying every Christian is bad, every Jew is bad, every anything is bad. If only one of those things is offensive, then you're the problem in the conversation. Now, the point, I shouldn't say it like that. If only, like, all of those things are the same sentiment. So either you look at them as the same thing or you recognize that you have a blind spot. Let's put it that way. And then he says the watered down American Zionist Islam. I mean, this is such an important point to be brushed over. What he's trying to highlight there is that Zionism has taken a part of Islam and turned it into a manipulation, just like they have with Judaism. They're literally creating the thing that keeps them in their position. And it's taken advantage of Muslims and Jews. Now it says Ali and 2 other Michigan suspects are charged with conspiracy, we talked about this in the last show, to provide material support and resources. So they're not even charging them with being the ones carrying things out. They're simply, and this is my point, these are the main 2 from Dearborn, Michigan. And what they're saying is, or was this the ones, I believe so. The first 2 is what I'm referencing in my point right now, is that you could argue that they were taken advantage of. They were there, or in the conversation, had no real intention of doing anything, and they just get somebody who jumps in, an FBI agent that goes, oh, Muslims talking about guns, they must be bad, and ultimately creates a circumstance, right? And then you have a guy who comes in who creates more rhetoric, starts talking about weird, things, and maybe they're going, who the hell is this guy? And ultimately then go, we have to stop it now before it happens, jump in, arrest everybody, and make this the case. Now they can deny, but they're going to go, but here's the third guy they're with, and look at how guilty he is. Then all of a sudden, they're all guilty because they say that guy's connected. They've done this over and over and over. I'm not saying I know exactly what's happening, but they've done this before. And here's what I find even more revealing. It says, they're charged with conspiracy. So discussing, planning to provide the material support and resources to a designated terrorist organization and receiving and transferring guns and ammunition for terrorism. So without the claim of terrorism, they own guns. They took them to the shooting range, and they say they provided material support to a terrorist organization. So what are we talking about? In what possible way? ISIS is what they're talking about. So what you're saying is they bought guns and planned something. So show me where they provided material support for anything other than what you claim they were doing, let alone ISIS, who doesn't even seem to be involved in the conversation. This is a stretch, guys. Unless there's more, this is a very obvious stretch. Now, the suspects, they say, are accused of sharing ISIS propaganda in group chats, which could mean damn near anything today. To them, ISIS propaganda could mean a Palestinian flag, for all I know. But they're not showing you, so we don't get to find out. Let's not forget that right after this, you saw, what's her name, that Sarah something, push out that very bombastic lie about ISIS threatening New York, and all the major accounts shared it, and it got deleted because it was false. But they didn't even check it. They don't care. I'll show you some more of those toward the end. Like, there's a gaslighting happening here. But my point is that they shared propaganda. Okay. And then it says, and scouting LGBTQ-friendly locations for a possible attack. Now, here's what's crazy about this. So right there, make sense of that. So these are supposed to be lefty terrorists, but they're aiming for LGBTQ places? Right? I mean, that's what they're saying about this, right? You can't, ultimately, this comes down to a mashing together of agendas because it hits all the boxes. Now, you'll even find in the next report, they also add on Jewish locations. Funny how they just keep kind of tacking on to the story, even though I don't see anything to back up most of the stuff. So here, that's the first report. London attacker. Oh, that's the one we just talked about before. So here's the next report. On the 9th, he shares this today. The leadership of Haba in the ISIS-linked Halloween plot case shows what real partnership between, they just love to pat each other on the back. When, as far as I could tell, almost nothing has happened. It says our teams dismantled, dismantled a multi-state ISIS network before they could strike. See, what's unusual about this is for someone to be praising something before it's even fleshed out. They haven't even indicted anybody. And he's going, we broke down a that's not what you do until you've proven that. And you haven't proven that until people are charged and found guilty of a crime. But see, this guy is so desperate to flood the thing with anything other than the fact that he's failing you that I think they've literally manufactured a plot. It's what they do. It's probably in some book on the FBI shelf. It says our teams dismantled a multi-state ISIS network. The same ISIS Trump says he's defeated 17 times. That's how you protect America. Oh, thanks, buddy. And he does that by literally highlighting what Fox News says about what he's doing. Very, very professional. Haba, DOJ moved swiftly and decisively to stop the link. So it's ISIS-linked plot. So we still have yet to see it flesh out, but now they're pointing back to what they did. It says, federal prosecutors say the FBI has broken up. Yeah, I love that. The government claims shouldn't be paying. Right after that, you should go, maybe they're lying. Has broken up an ISIS-linked network stretching from Michigan to New Jersey, charging several young men in a coordinated investigation that allegedly involved plans for a Halloween mass shooting. Now, let me ask you something. Let's say one of these people is an agent, Mossad, CIA, or just a lackey, a scapegoat. One of them in, what do they say? Michigan, New Jersey, whatever. Not let's just say New Jersey. So not the two from Michigan, right? The Dearborn place, they clearly seem to want to make a case for. Let's just say they have one guy in New Jersey they can literally make a case for, and they say they're all connected. Now, what happens if they say because he's the ISIS guy, and I can prove he's in this chat room that we created, that suddenly they're all ISIS, and every gun and everything they did is all criminal terrorist activity? We've seen them make cases like that before. So I again, stress that we need to demand more evidence around this. The Justice Department announced the new charges Wednesday, calling the probe a sprawling federal investigation into extremists who used encrypted messaging to communicate, which is like 90% of I don't know, I shouldn't say it like that. A huge portion of people in the know of what's going on in the world are using, maybe I take it back. I think everyone's using WhatsApp and Signal and everything today, whether those are even truly secure, to argue that encrypted chats or owning a gun or going to a shooting range or talking about Pumpkin Day are indicative of anything other than most Americans is insulting. U.S. Attorney Haba said New Jersey defendants, quote, had pledged themselves to ISIS and were frequent communication with Michigan's cell. Okay, I'd love to see the proof of that. I'd love to see where they pledged themselves. What is this, a fraternity? Is there some kind of ISIS joining group online? Maybe. I'm just saying, I think it's weird to argue that they're pledging themselves to ISIS right now. On top of that they were in communication with the Michigan cell, which right now has never even been proven. That's a couple of people you were arrested in Michigan. That's all it really comes down to. This is crazy to me. What do you think this looks like to you? Take a look at this picture. He's literally holding a samurai sword, which I can tell you right now does not appear to be a real one. So, Milo Serdrat allegedly sent these images to a friend over social media. He must be a terrorist, or maybe a Halloween costume, since what we're literally talking about is Pumpkin Day and Halloween. All this to me does is add less. So what they're trying to do is make this look like these are all guys dressing up in their terrorist uniforms to get ready to carry out a terrorist attack on Pumpkin Day. When he's dressing up, they're talking about going out and doing a good deed at some point. They talk about going out on Halloween. They generally shoot guns and go to the shooting range, which is actually pretty provable. And then he sends a picture of his Halloween costume. Now, all hypothetical. Maybe I'm wrong. But doesn't seem far, far more likely that all of this points in that direction than what they're trying to patch together, especially since they've lied to you your entire life? Tell me what you think. It's just this in particular. It just feels, that's why I think it's grayed out too. Because if there was more defined definition, I bet you could literally prove what Halloween costume that was. Agents say they trained at Detroit area ranges. Right. They went and shot at ranges like any American that owns a gun. Shared ISIS propaganda and discussed targeting LGBTQ bars in Ferndale and a Jewish center. Well, that's weirdly tacked on all of a sudden. That's been nowhere in the conversation until recently. Now, all of a sudden, because some ADL members had put the Jewish Center there too, because that's, I'm half kidding. How does it make sense, right? How does this make any sense? So why would that be the target when they're trying to kind of overlap this with this leftist terrorism influence, talking about a connection to Iran in the last one, now a connection to an ISIS preacher? Now, here's the interesting part. It says, or one of them, in Newark, this guy here, who you can't see, funny how you get to see everyone else's faces, but not theirs. It says charges of conspiring to provide material support to a foreign terrorist organization. Jimenez, or what is that? How do you pronounce that again? I think it's Jimenez. No, that's Jimenez. Also faces an attempt count after agents arrested him on Tuesday trying to fly to Syria, or to Turkey on his way to Syria. Okay, well, my gut's telling me that this guy with the actual ISIS flag, which actually I can't tell, that looks more like a Shihada flag. In any case, which would say everything, by the way, somebody who doesn't even understand the difference would not actually be pledging to ISIS. I'm pretty sure that's Shihada, by the way. How embarrassing. See, this actually adds so much to me. So this, to me, is the person they're trying to frame as the one who's actually the ISIS-linked one. The rest of them seem to be connected by just being in the chat room. So how much you want to bet this turns out to be somebody who you don't actually see go to jail, somebody who ends up flying away to another country, right? Whether or not. Now, that would speak to me, and this is all, again, just all hypothetical, to be somebody who was in this to create the idea and blame the people they originally wanted to aim at. These are the guys, one of the guys anyway, that from Michigan, who they're claiming was planning a terrorist attack with nothing but basic information. And it says a criminal complaint is merely an allegation. All defendants are innocent until proven guilty. Okay, well, he just shared this from the 8th, but he's now calling them the people that did this. Even though this article that he shared literally says, we don't know yet. They're not guilty. Haven't been proven. So here's where we are right now. Everything we just showed you. What do you think about this story? All right? What do you think with this information so far? Do you feel like that sounds like a slam dunk? I mean, I'll say again, if we get the full chat, which I'm almost willing to bet you that doesn't happen. If that, and again, the idea that with even Tyler Robinson, you can't prove that they didn't alter that or manipulate it, but I want to see at least some kind of conversation to be able to flesh out in what context they were saying pumpkin day, in what context. And if it really just comes down to a super benign conversation that they claim means what they think it wink means, then we need to call this out like we're doing now. Now, here is what John Rich came out and said, and this is just adding to the larger thing, which they have a very obvious interest to push this, the team sport politics players like John Rich. Don't forget what they were screeching about in the beginning of Trump's administration. Alex Jones and Rich and all the rest of them, Iranian drones sniffing for nuclear bombs, and that was Sean Ryan and all that big hype that went literally nowhere. And now Sean Ryan's putting out some bunk overlapping They Live advertisement using Franklin, downtown Franklin in Tennessee, acting like he's calling out the totalitarian thing, where he's literally supporting the growth of it by doing all the same, CIA Sean Ryan. Here's John Rich. According to my friends at Fort Campbell, so we could totally trust them, there are sleeper cells is virtually every zip code in America. No. Sleeper cells. That's exactly the narrative they said before. Now, I wouldn't doubt that, but you want to know what I believe that means? Israel. You can literally prove that. And I'll even play that clip again because I think it's important to understand how clearly it is what they're saying, as well as the Mossad agent that just literally told you the same thing. That they have people in every city, that they can control the flow, supply chain, alter it to their favor.
Part of the plan is the reconstruction, the rebuilding of Gaza.
Oh, wait. That's not the right one. I keep doing that. What was it? There it is.
How did you convince Hezbollah to buy this?
Well, obviously, they didn't know that they were buying it from Israel.
Who did they buy it from, or think they were buying it from?
We have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel, shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor.
And remember, the ex-Mossad just came out in an interview saying they have infiltrated electronics in every country in the world. It's just so obvious right now. And so when he's talking about sleeper cells, I mean, you could argue it could be any country, right? Just like the US probably does all over the world. But to argue that this therefore means the one boogeyman they're trying to point to is just, you're deceiving yourself. He says, this ain't a big city problem, folks. It's in our backyards. Watch out, stay vigilant, right? Basically, tell on your neighbor. Like, these people are turning into exactly what they were criticizing about the left. In fact, if you understand the way this works, they already were. It's the same damn thing, guys. Alan Mizrahi points out they're trying to destabilize Mexico and derail Sheinbaum's fantastic presidency, whatever you think about that is his opinion, over Mexico's support for Palestine. Again, maybe there's different reasons, but I agree there's an issue there. I also agree that the U.S. government trying to force the sale of GMO everything on Mexico is a huge sticking point for Trump. And so there's many different factors for why this is happening, but he writes, Israel is poison for literally the whole world. I agree. Now, this is Israel's ambassador to Mexico makes up assassination plot to blame Iran. It's not secret, guys. They're trying to do this everywhere. Even the Trump administration, in the beginning at least, told you that Iran is not seeking nuclear weapons and does not have them. Israel's trying to force the hand. They are literally trying to drive us. So to create what they want for their long shot agenda to go after Iran or whoever they want to go after, added to the list of countries they're currently bombing and genociding. So the point is to see that there's an interest, an effort to create that line. And the U.S. government has never been more pliable to the Israeli interest. The U.S. government, not the American people, but the government. That's sure as hell clear. Here's an interesting overlap. Valentina Gomez. You seen this maniac going around, this very obvious Zionist, self-pronounced, or self-declared. She says, if something happens to me, which, let's be clear, first of all, every politician there's a risk, right? Somebody could be crazy. So there could be radicalized people left and right. Totally not unrealistic to think you're some risk. Or podcasters, myself included, anybody. I get death threats. I get disgusting emails. I just don't share them all the time because I don't think it's worth it. I don't want to give them any promotion. But I think all of us get something like that because we're talking about contentious ideas and people get, there's crazy people out there. That's just to say that there's a risk in any of them, especially for a potential politician. She's not even there yet. So right now, I would argue that's pretty minimal. But on top of that, if you're out there screaming about how there's no genocide, no one's starving, and Israel's the best in the world, well, you're going to cause a lot more of that. Not to say it's justified, but when you're supporting a genocide, you're probably going to irritate some people. Overall, it's not to say she's not at risk, but the way that she's using the idea of that risk, and again, no much more or less than anybody else in politics, and she says, if something happens to me, it's the Muslims. That's not a joke, not a fake account, the Muslims. Okay. And she goes, I'm requesting Kash Patel to personally oversee this investigation and provide me with an FBI security detail. So the very idea of the detail is what then therefore proves that you were always threatened by people that hate Jews or whatever she's trying to claim right there. And she goes, Dan Bongino, Charlie Kirk, and I have the same opinions regarding Islam. See, they're trying to rope in Charlie Kirk, the one who was calling out Israel before they killed him. Now they want me dead, she says. So she's trying to use Charlie Kirk and the lie they're telling about him. And this person is, in my opinion, the most obvious example of a Zionist, clumsy propagandist trying to work their way into a position of power. She goes, Trump was shot, Charlie was murdered, conservatives are next. God, and my point is she's using the talking points, but in very clumsy fashion. That's very Zionist. It's exactly what they do. And then points to a bunch of people online saying mean things to her or threatening her with crimes. Yeah, that happens. Call them out. If you think it's a crime to say something out loud or type something out, do it. Go after it. Expose the reality of your lack of free speech beliefs. I say, if something happens to me, it's the Muslims, she says. Right. So if anything happens, it was all the Muslims. They all did it. Guys, how do anybody take people like this seriously? I genuinely don't think Americans are this stupid or this disgusting. But we all know who is. The mask is off, guys. Hashtag Zionism is not Judaism. The reality is clear on this. There's only one real aggressively driving force to just go all Muslims bad, and it's nobody's confused about that. So when she's coming out and saying, like, she could say simply the radical Muslims or the people on the left, but she says the Muslims did it. It's just so far over the top for exactly what the agenda is. Loomer and the rest. It's disgusting. And people like this, the Randy Fines of the world, they're not fighting for American interests, guys. They're just not. So on that same note, Kovrok Omasian, Americans were lied to about the war on terror since 9/11. They were in the same bed all along. Syria's al-Shara Jolani arrives in U.S. for official visit. I guess they're meeting tomorrow or whatever the day they're meeting. And even Grok, this guy asked, hey, how did he come to power? What was his origin story? So here they are right now trying to downplay this, the team sport politics. Both sides, by the way, since they all seem to support the terrorists that they've been fighting their entire lives or claiming they were, now that Israel has them in power in Syria. And here's what even Grok has to say. Al-Shara Jolani, the one that is the leader of Al-Qaeda, was born Al-Shara in Damascus in 1982, was also known as Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, joined insurgents against U.S. forces in Iraq. Okay, so if you support what they're doing, point out that Donald Trump is currently supporting, so is Biden, the guy who fought and killed Americans. Not the lies they sell about Soleimani, but the reality of who was actually doing this. And at the same time, then you can prove the U.S. was part of that, but we'll keep it current. Serving time in Camp Bucca. He served time in a military prison. Released around 2011. Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi dispatched him personally. Baghdadi. The Trump said he killed so many times. Baghdadi put him in Syria to build Jabhat al-Nusra. Vanessa Bailey and I have talked about it many times. As an Al-Qaeda affiliate amid what they claim was a civil war. See, that's such BS. It's an obvious regime change, infiltration, proxy war. It says he later split from ISIS, the group that Kash Patel says they're fighting right now, briefly pledged to Al-Qaeda Central, then rebranded to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. That's Al-Qaeda. Consolidating, rebel control in Idlib through military gains and pragmatic governance, culminating in Assad's ouster and his rise to power that they all currently support. Israel and everybody in the U.S. government. That's Grok, by the way, guys. Not that you should blindly trust Grok, but recognize that even this random Grok element that they're trying to completely use as propaganda is telling you they're currently working with Al-Qaeda. Here's a clip of Brett McGurk telling you what Idlib, which is what they're referencing, the main location for ISIS is where he came from, or in Syria anyway, what it was and why that was a problem. But now it's okay, but it's okay. We'll work with him in Syria.
Idlib province, look, Idlib province is the largest al-Qaeda safe haven since 9/11, tied directly to Ayman al-Zawahiri. This is a huge problem. It's been a problem for some time. We have shown the spotlight, the international spotlight on ISIS. We've been very focused on Al-Qaeda in Idlib province. Leaders of Al-Qaeda that make their way to Idlib province often do not make their way out of there. But we have to ask a question, why and how is Ayman al-Zawahiri's deputy finding his way to Idlib province?
U.S.
Why
government.
is this happening?
Turkey.
How are they getting there? They're not paratroopers. So, and the approach, I obviously will not talk about anything the U.S. government has done in certain parts of Syria on this problem, but the approach by some of our partners to send in tens of thousands of tons of weapons and looking the other way as these foreign fighters come into Syria may not have been the best approach.
Yeah, duh, right? One of the moments of being candid, right? It's just obvious. So again, the reality is that very location he's discussing in Idlib, we talked about ad nauseum back when it was happening, but most people now at the current political field have no idea about that nuanced conversation because it sort of woke up with Trump's first administration and people started paying attention to politics. Not an insult to anybody. I get why people don't want to, but recognize that moment forward is when there was kind of a surge of average people diving into all this, and there's a ton of information about what they've been doing for years. Consolidating rebel control in Idlib. That is al-Jolani. That's who they're currently working with right now, who Trump is welcoming to the White House. I mean, if you're a Republican, a Christian, if you support what you claim was a war on terror, how in the world are you okay with any of this? It's a knock on Biden and Trump and the entire U.S. government. And Marwa Osman points out an important overlap to this. That Donald Trump lifted the sanctions because Israel wanted that. As always, you have a reality that Israel, whether Trump or Biden or Bush or Obama, rather the U.S. government is acting for a foreign power's interests at your expense. Hold on. Oh, I think I've got that. Hold on. It's right here. There we go.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Fox.
Will you discuss the Abraham Accords when you meet with the president of Syria?
That's Jolani, the leader, an Al-Qaeda leader. That's what they're talking about.
Well, we're going to meet, and I think he's doing a very good job. It's a tough neighborhood. And he's a tough guy.
I mean, you realize the Trump administration last time was fighting this guy, or so they claimed. We know that's not true. This is how dumb they think we are, that you can literally be pretending to bomb this guy, to pretending to fight them in Syria, and then literally work with them now that Israel gets what they want.
But I got along with him very well, and a lot of progress has been made with Syria. That's a tough one.
See, I mean, this is just blatant. I mean, whether he even knows or not, Trump just says what he wants you to think. It's like every politician. Syria is an absolute, complete meltdown. People are being ethnically cleansed. No one's even talking about it. Israel's building bases. They're overthrowing places. They're building Hebrew-named settlements. They're literally taking over like everywhere else. And they're ethnically cleansing. They are murdering people, Christians, Alawites, all across the country. But they're doing great.
But a lot of progress has been made. You know, we took the sanctions off at the request of Turkey, at the request of actually Israel, at the request of a few different...
Yeah, because Israel's literally occupying the country now. Israel, and as Jolani even said publicly, is allowed. So they're working on behalf of a foreign power. Not surprising.
Countries. And we took the sanctions off to give them a chance.
Yeah, to give Israel a chance. They could have given the Syrian country a chance before they destroyed it. But now that Israel has power, well, we want to give Syria a chance. They're just such disgusting, dishonest people at its core. Yeah, my point is, I'm very much of the mind that Donald Trump knows exactly what he's doing right there. He knows exactly what he's lying about. As she writes, Trump just said it out loud. We lifted the sanctions based on Israel's request. And with that one line, the entire illusion for those who ever painted Nusra as a pillar of justice for Palestine collapsed. Syria, once the beating heart of Arab dignity, has been handed over on a silver platter to Zionism and Western imperialism. The so-called Syrian revolutionaries who cheered for freedom while waving NATO's flag can now watch their poster boy, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, the washed-up terrorist once hunted by the U.S. for a $10 million bounty. They only took the bounty off when he took over Syria. How insane is that? On a dime. Being rebranded as tough, pragmatic leader because Tel Aviv said so. This is what your revolution led to. Terrorists turned Western assets, Wahhabi, Saudi Arabia, or, Wahhabist ideology, and then they turned media darlings, a nation gutted, looted, and occupied by foreign powers that once swore to liberate it. How utterly shameful. And the social justice warriors, which, by the way, are all the right now. I want you to really think about that. The reality of who currently are the social justice warriors, that's the right. Not every one of them, but all the same woke right people who are out there screaming about what's right. It's the same idea, guys, from a different angle. And, it's important to call them out. The John Riches and people like that, they are the snowflakes, they are the broflakes and the social justice warriors of the current situation. And it says that the Twitter nationalists, the fake revolution mouthpieces, they'll still preach about justice and human rights while their idols kneel before the very empire they once claimed to resist as they chopped off the heads of Alawites, Christians, Druze, and Shias in Syria. Jolani is the perfect emblem of this moral decay, a man who traded his past and ongoing terrorism for PR interviews and Western approval. And for Syria, and this is such a perfect point to realize that these are the people that have always been doing this. Some of them buy into it, usually the people that are used, but the leaders like Mohammed bin Salman admitted that they are the ones that created these networks, but in some cases lost control of them. The truth is, though, and what they said was the leaders didn't even believe the ideology because this is where it comes from. It's just sad how clear this all can be. And yet people like us will scream it, but the Joneses and all the rest will continue to push you down the two-party paradigm. It says, for Syria's sake, for what's left of Arab world's sake, it's time we call this what it is, a complete, humiliating surrender to Zionist imperialism, wrapped in a language of revolution and what damn revolution? It's just sad. Now, Jack Maxey points out, this mother effer murdered Americans himself. But because Israel needs a proxy, Trump will invite this POS to the White House. I grow to viscerally hate Trump more, he says, with every traitorous act, who I believe is a Republican, or at least a overlapping support. War room. The point, though, he killed Americans, guys. Are you America first? Right? Do we care that there's an American in Israel's prisons right now that was born in Florida for a year? No, who cares? America first. Well, that doesn't mean what you think it means, apparently, if you understand where this current administration is going. So who are they going after? Right? I mean, I briefly point this out again. I'm going to do this continually until somebody's arrested. Anybody. Whether it's Comey, James, anybody, Bolton. But I don't think that's going to happen. The reality to me seems to be that they're going after you. Now, this guy, when he's speaking, I swear, it's my opinion, but I feel like he's almost borderline laughing like a duper's delight about how dumb they think we are. This Zionist is actively working. I mean, remember, he's the one that seems to be above Marco Rubio. He's an advisor that seems to be leading the charge, whether immigration, whether any number of very alarming, like Venezuela, for example. Why do you think that makes sense? You understand this guy is a tried and true, a diehard Zionist who puts Israel's interest above yours every day of the week, and then uses things like this to make you think that you're winning. How many times can you say this? How many times can you say Comey and Clapper and Brennan? Oh, we got some big information coming down, and they're all going to go to jail 2 months ago. Well, if you call Obama a traitor one more time, and let's see, like, I agree, and I think they all should go to jail. I don't believe it's going to happen because these people are playing you.
Well, and Clapper, Brennan, Obama, Monaco, all conspired together, all worked together to try to sabotage, undermine, unravel the democratic institutions and structures of this country. The Russiagate.
Yeah, but Trump's got plenary authority, though, right? Our processes and democracy and freedom, but Trump can do whatever he wants whenever because he's a complete hypocrite. And that's why he laughs at you. You can listen to him speak, and he doesn't believe all of the words he gives you when he tries to criticize the Democrats. It's insulting. Be smarter than this.
Hoax, the Russiagate conspiracy.
Yep.
And all of the assaults against our liberties that went with it. The pre-dawn raids, the handcuffing.
Yeah, you mean like they're all doing right now against Democrats, against Americans. But it's okay because they're doing it to fight the bad thing. So we can do the wrong thing to go after the wrong thing. Perfectly makes sense.
Of innocent Americans, the espionage against President Trump's campaign and staff.
You get it, guys. I can't even stomach listening to this guy say it. This is so insulting. Okay, good. Let's just say we agree with everything. When are they going to be arrested, Matt Miller? Or sorry, just as dumb as Matt Miller, but Stephen Miller. Well, as I simply, he writes, I cannot find words harsh enough to condemn the conduct. Do something about it. Our enemies are domestic. You see how much they're pushing this? This is John Strand. He says, I simply said, cool story. Arrest someone or shut up. And even he said 100%. The point is that everybody wants this, but it seems, my thing is, well, how are you going to be 100% if you seem to constantly still support the statement? How many times can you float this idea before you recognize nothing's going to happen? Here's a Trump supporter, and he says, Pam Bondi, I think so, Pam Bondi and her DOJ prosecutors were handed enough evidence on a silver platter to put people away for life, beginning with Tulsi Gabbard's DNI declassified presser, and there's not been one single arrest. I mean, I agree. I think you can prove that what they did in Russiagate was completely illegal. Same with a ton of other things. Nobody's been arrested. 78 million of us who voted for Trump are asking why the hell not? See? Yeah, so I was forgetting why I thought that, but so he says it right there. And I simply said, because you were lied to. And if you think Bondi is responsible, you'll continue to be played. Here. You've seen this before. Another one of these, Charlie's voice rising. It's got, 182,000 followers after like 30 seconds of being there because they just say Charlie's name and then just say, Trump, MAGA, Trump, Patriot. And everyone goes, retweet. It's just kind of sad. I argue a lot of it's algorithmic and just what the platform is promoting. But this is about the same thing. You already saw the clip. They're just reposting this again yesterday. This clip's been around this is not new. This is what happens. They go, breaking, bam. And this is a clip from a week ago, wherever it is. And it is her saying, I'm more than ready to show the evidence. Governor Gavin Newsom is being investigated for criminal schemes. Yeah, he's a criminal. Okay, now arrest him or investigate and show us the results. But nothing continues to happen. You get the point, guys. I can go over all of them. I already showed you how Comey's investigation appears to be set up to fail. And then they're going to blame Democrat radical judges when in reality, the case was completely flimsy to start, which is why the Trump guy said no, and they fired him for it. He wasn't a Democrat. He's somebody who was, I'm not going to look like an idiot for you. And he got fired. Now, 5 times August says, how many times can a guy talk of corruption and hoaxes and scams and never hold anyone accountable for any of it before you realize it's all just an act? See, he was supportive in the beginning and he just has principles. He recognized he's being played. I'd like to believe that's most people. They just don't all have a large account to show it. He says it's branding and marketing. It's breadcrumbs. Exactly. It's just enough to keep you hanging in there a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer. Every single time. Stop falling for it and free yourselves. Look at this guy. I mean, it's just insane, especially to him, too. Of all people, somebody who was very much pushing back, this guy says, you sound vaccinated. That's all they can do. People that are blind supporters of the team just need to use partisan arguments because you must be a Democrat. He says, I'm not. Trump is, though. How perfect is that? That's what he says. Look at that. See, this is the kind of people we're dealing with. So he goes, Trump is, though, because Trump says and has said repeatedly that he took a shot, right? He goes, you're stupid if you actually believe that. So now you're willing to take, so Trump's lying to you about that, and you know for a fact, right? It's just what you think you know, which is not proven, is the absolute fact, and what you can prove is not true because Trump said no. People are children in the partisan game, guys. As James Corbett, which I'm glad to see on Jimmy Dore yet again, he says, this is just Jimmy Dore posting this, James Corbett tells Jimmy the coming civil war will not be red versus blue or Democrat versus Republican. And I know James will have to argue he's not saying we know for a fact that's coming, but the idea of the possibility building, I agree with him. It's not about left and right. He says it's not about left versus right. It's up, down. It's the masses against the oligarchs, the billionaire class that actually runs everything. And that's going to be the civil war, if and when. In fact, he says the oligarchs have already launched this war, even though most people have not yet caught on. Now, that I agree with. They're waging, I mean, they always have. As James and I have talked about many times over the years, they're waging their war against you. It's always been that way. Now, whether we decide to wage a war back, well, that's what that would create. The point, though, is that at this moment in time, they are waging their war on you like they always have. It's just become, I think it feels like a final step. And he says, fifth generation warfare is essentially the governments of nations warring against their own citizens economically, with biohazards and biosecurity threats and with information warfare. 100%. Now, funny overlap to that. Let's see if I can get that to come up. There it is. Oops. Is we just talked about this, and even the image will bring back exact moments. This whole burning cyber truck in front of the Trump Tower, right? The title was Fifth Generation Warfare, Drones, Fog, False Flags, and Political Destabilization. Remember all the hype of the drones and the fog and all that stuff? Jones and the rest were pitching this, and the Iran seeking bombs. That was all at the same time. It was just a bunch of hype, guys. I mean, over and over this happens. Fifth generation warfare is what we're experiencing. And it's not just the governments, it's the people that we keep pointing to. It is the team sport players. James has been on this longer than anybody. Now, I believe, as I think most people can see if they care to look, that most conservatives, most Americans are finally starting to see through it. The two-party illusion. It is falling apart. Now, here's an article from USA Today, simply quoting something written by a conservative. November 8th. I voted for Trump. I feel completely swindled. Now, of course, you can argue that he's a secret Democrat, or he never supported Trump, or he's got Trump derangement syndrome. You can always assume whatever you want. For all those people, you're not, you can assume over there. We want to have an honest adult conversation about what we can prove. The reality is you could always say that. He could do that, but the facts show you something different, right? Most people, even Candace Owens will show you again with large influence, is starting to say that he is, well, it's not, again, that's why I always get mad at myself for even doing this. It's objectively clear that he has not followed through. So we could be objective and say, well, we disagree on what he did and Trump's promises kept. The truth is you can prove he has not. It's insulting to say otherwise. And that's why people like Candace are starting to tip that over. And I'm glad to see. I'm skeptical where that goes. My point in all of this is that this seems, whether or not this is a propaganda tool, you know as well as I, there are conservatives that are feeling this way right now. So let's not play the game where we try to go, oh, it's USA Today. We all know that happens. We know they're fake news. We know the mainstream, but consider the point regardless, because we know this is happening. This is what the person wrote. A year after the president election, I feel completely swindled. I am a libertarian who voted for Donald Trump in 2024. The first time I ever voted for a Republican for president, because he made efforts to listen to address our concerns. Or he feigned anyway. He came to our national convention, promised to stay out of wars and slash government spending. Right. So he came and said what you wanted to hear. I mean, this is what we need to get to, guys. I'm glad they're seeing it. I'm not trying to make fun. The point is that he's going, I see it now. I was swindled. Now, see that in a big sense. Don't then jump to the next Republican you like. Don't then jump to the next Democrat you like. Recognize politicians lie. And they always will. Their job is to, even if that isn't always the case, it's in your interest to assume that. It's in your interest to go, he might be lying, so let me check. Let me look to the source material. Let me verify their claims. Let me hold their feet to the fire because they could be lied to. I say this all the time. An honest person would demand that of you, like I do, right? I check what I'm saying. Don't blindly listen to me. Look at the source material. Come to your conclusion about it. So in this case, he came and said, this is what you want to hear. So don't fall for that again. Even if he means it, maybe he won't be able to follow through. It's basic logic. And he says, but none of what he promised happened. Exactly. The only thing Trump did do was pardon Silk Road founder Ross Ulbricht, which I agree I absolutely agree with that. Funny how when that first happened, what did Derek and I say when it first happened? That's probably going to be the only thing. That was a what's the word I'm looking for? A throw you a bone, right? They wanted that to start with that point. Nothing else seems to have happened. And he says, which I'm grateful for, but he has fallen completely flat on his face on all his other promises. Entirely agree. Now he is going after libertarians like Thomas Massey, whatever you think is, whether libertarian or not, or Rand Paul, both representing Kentucky, a complete betrayal. Who both, by the way, very clearly demonstrate far more America First principles than anybody in his administration, which most Republicans are starting to say, by the way. Now it says what Doge found in terms of cuts was great. Now, see, that's flatly, I completely disagree with that. What Doge has, if you look at what they provably found, not what he claimed, not what he incorrectly wrote down on that website that doesn't exist anymore. They lied to you guys. They didn't cut costs. They lied. There were things they cut. Half of that was respent somewhere else. They removed funding that was already going away, for example. Or, it's very easy to prove. On top of that, it just kind of went away and stopped, and they never even really tried. Now the spending's higher, government's bigger. You got played. It never even went in the direction they claimed it did. He says what Doge found in terms of cuts was great. But right after that came the one big, beautiful bill and continuing resolution that undid all of that progress. Now, again, there really wasn't even that much progress. They very much just moved things around, including USAID and the State Department. But overall, even if you think they did good things, they ruined it all with that, which is what Massey and Rand and plenty of others were saying. And it says what Doge, and he goes on to say the bill is one of the largest spending packages in recent U.S. history, which was tons of money for the web manufacturers of merchants of death and all the problems that we claim we're trying to stop. The candidate who ran on cutting wasteful spending and is also going after Massey and Paul because they recognized it for what it was. Simple. What Doge tried to do was great, and I am supportive, he says, of the spending cuts. And I would be if that's what they were actually doing. That did come of it, which really was nothing. But the fallout from the bill put a damper on all the great progress made. Musk rightfully called it an abomination. Yeah, he did, even though he wasn't really changing much, and he still supports Trump. Feels like a game to me, quite honest. Feels like it was about AI and getting access to all your personal data, which they gave to Israel. Very easy to prove. If the president elections were held today, he says, with the same candidates, I like this. He goes, I would sit out. You see, I'm telling you guys, this is where we are. It's not, now Democrat. It's people are going, I see it. If we were back there, I wouldn't. Remember when we were doing that? Going, everybody, vote no one, protest, abstain on the record. And what did we get from Anomaly and all the rest? You're black-pilled, purity test. And guess what many of them are saying now? Oh, look at Trump betraying us. Yeah, too bad you weren't. Imagine if we had got the vast majority of Americans going, Kamala and Trump are the same thing, and we're not going to participate in your stolen, manipulated election. The government is not even participating. They're giving us an illusion, a theater show. We don't believe it. Now, I don't know what that would lead to. I do know that change would come, though. Maybe good, maybe bad. The point is, we all want this to go. We want this to shift. I'm just being honest about that. Even positive actions could lead to negative things. The end of the day is that we need to stop the usual, the status quo. And I would argue that people in the world would support that this would cause radical change. We'd probably just see them start changing amongst themselves because they don't want to lose power. You would see presidents get impeached. You would see Congress start suddenly remembering they have powers of war. You would see that change. That's what I believe anyway. And right now, with him now saying I would sit out, I wouldn't try to even vote for Green Party. I would just, and that's where, not sit out. I would argue if it was legally the reality that should be, you could go, I abstain. I'm going to check abstention, and I want you to tally and register abstentions on the screen next to everything else. And if you have 99% abstentions from what happened, the world would see that we are all aware of the lie, that we are being stolen from, that we are being run by Israel, whatever it is. I'm telling you guys, I really want people to try to recognize that this is my opinion, but I think the facts back up the reality that not only is the two-party illusion breaking down, most people see it, and people are not only going looking for another candidate, they're starting to go, who is that guy talking about vote no one? I'm telling you, something's shifting. Quote, it says, or rather continues, I am, however, extremely like to vote on the upcoming 2026 midterms and the 2028 general elections. So feels that way about last election, but still interested in voting. It's a positive step, but not completely there yet, in my opinion. He says, I feel that I need to do what I can to ensure liberty advances, which includes voting for Libertarian Party candidates or candidates who have libertarian values. Yeah. Look, I've always said, if you feel voting makes a difference, then you go for it. I mean, you do whatever you think makes a difference. Don't do it because I'm of the mind that it has been stolen from us. But at least consider that's the case and recognize that voting is probably the least impactful thing you can do politically. Now, I know people disagree with that. The reality is, in a actual state of society that is when we're forced to live in a state of society, which I don't want to be in. I want to be in a world with no government. But since we are forced to live within it, and we do have a situation where you have a constitutional reality, which in some way tries to check and balance that system. Right? The reality is you can see the power in that if it actually functions. Where we are is a situation where the power structures have recognized how that dampened their own growth and power. And so they long since have taken that away. We can see it, whether it's voting machines. I mean, I go off on this forever. But here is Candace Owens saying basically the same thing, that we were tricked by Trump. I agree with her. Now, question whether or not this is her using, recognizing the writing on the wall, opportunism. Ask the same thing for me. Ask whether or not I'm doing that, but question everybody, right? Nonetheless, I only say that because I do have skepticism, but I do agree with what she's saying. And I'm glad that somebody with this much reach is starting to put a question mark over the two-party illusion and the party in general.
Infiltrate and convince us that this is the same party while we get gaslit about everything that's happening. Like I said, you lost the party. MAGA got fractured, not when Tucker Carlson interviewed Nick Fuentes, but when Donald Trump looked at us in our faces and said, Epstein who? That's when it was game over. Because Israel First is a cancer cell. It is a cancer cell, left or right, to everything and everyone that wants to play around with it. It is a radical psychosis that has manifested itself within both parties. And it is so radical that, in case you missed it, yesterday, they started attacking Brett Cooper. Brett Cooper, 23-year-old, bubbly Brett Cooper. She makes the majority of her videos dedicated to pop culture. Yes, she covers things that are, I would say, mainstream politics, nothing too daring, never speaks about Israel. And she did her part, by the way. Zionists wanted her to do her part and encouraged New Yorkers to get out and vote against Mamdani. But it's not enough, of course, because this is a radical ideology. You give them 100%. You even say one critique, and they don't want to break bread with you. They want to destroy you, and that's what they want to do to Brett Cooper.
Done with Donald Trump, or could you see a way that you would end up perhaps voting for him? Oh, you can't run again, obviously, but would you support him publicly again?
So I want to be clear. I don't regret voting for Donald Trump above Kamala. I think he was the better candidate, certainly a better.
And that's why I still question. I just think that's insane. Think about where we are and what she's saying about him. And now you're going to say, I agree. I think she's the exact same problem. But I just think that's a weird thing. We are still driving people into the two-party paradigm. Now, maybe she believes that. Maybe that's what she thinks is the best choice. But I think we know what that really represents at the end of the day, whether she believes is true or right or not. So consider that. Two-party illusion is the problem.
Candidate above Joe Biden. But what I will say is that he's been a chronic disappointment. And I feel embarrassed that I told people to go vote for him because this wasn't going to happen and it is happening.
Okay, wait a minute, though. So how would you feel embarrassed to go vote for him if you say you'd still vote for him over Kamala? So what does that mean? In what world does that make sense? Those things don't equal each other. See, there's skepticism there. Again, I still argue I'm happy to see them pointing this out because it is what people need to understand. Right? That none of these people are on your side.
But I just think that the picture of politics in America is going to look very differently because of his actions. So I don't know where we go from here. I really don't. But this is not the candidate that I voted for.
Okay. Now I agree. And in the sense that what she's really kind of highlighting is that what the presentation is not what you're getting. We all could acknowledge that. This is what I'm trying to show people when you get the Eric Doughertys and Nick Shorters out there seal clapping about whatever Trump just said. And everything's the best, and we're winning, and everything's going to be John Rich, all the rest of them. They're all doing the same kind of thing. This, at very least, is an honest going, yes, they're all BS. We all know we're not getting what was promised. We all know that. And it's the same thing from the last administration, guys. We just have to start being honest and consistent and holding all of them to their feet to the fire. Now, this is what Godfrey random account put out, and I followed him because of this. Leading report says, breaking, 62% of U.S. adults say the two major political parties are doing such a poor job that third party is needed. And here's where we all have kind of been waiting for the, Elon Musk America Party kind of a shoe to drop, right? Where, in my opinion, it's not a new good thing. It's the last ditch effort to pretend that we're doing something new when it's just an extension of the two-party illusion. Whatever. Same kind of thing the UK deals with. It's the same, you can call it a false binary, but it's more than two choices, right? It's a false choice. You got all of the things that lead in the same direction at the end of the day, or just some variation therein, that there's one, and in this case, in their case, the EU, which is really the power structure. But what we're seeing here, just the report, take it for what you will. I agree with this in a general sense, whether that can be backed up statistically, is that most Americans are aware that we're being screwed every which way from everybody. They're all at the left and right. They all going in the same direction. We're still aiming at the left, regardless of what Trump is saying. And what Godfrey points out is the whole system is crashing down. Everybody realizes both parties work for Israel. Now, this is a very common sentiment right now, even on this platform that is kind of hell-bent on keeping you trapped in the paradigm. Think about what that shows you. And I simply said, exactly. Essentially, my show for the last year. But of course, the system won't let most see that. Now, what I argue, what you're going to see probably, if this ever eventually gets to where it needs to get, is that you're going to get a large, like a Canada starting to, or a Tucker who starts to come out and say, this is the thing. And, that's when you get that momentum, because it can be controlled into the next manipulation. That's how I see it anyway. But that's why you're here, because we talk about these things a year before it ever comes to pass. 5 times August says, Alex Zeck says the CDC is still corrupt to the core. It is. The NIH is still corrupt. It is. The FDA is still corrupt. It is. The same goes for the FBI, CIA, etc. The same goes for the entire government. That's why I like Alec. I've seen no significant changes, he says, towards the direction of health, peace, freedom since Trump took office 10 months ago. In fact, it's far the opposite. I've only seen the same technocratic, tyrannical, centralizing agenda continue to march along. See, he has principles. I honestly, to this day, I feel like I respect Alex Zeck more than most people on this platform because of our differing opinions in some cases, but because he is so absolutely adherent to his principles. You have to respect that. Trump and the Republican Party fooled all of you, he says, and it's time for you to admit it. Now realize, to make this clear, it's not just because we agree. If he had said this is what he thought was happening, then it was the reverse, and then he stood by that sentiment to this day because of something, my point would be, regardless of whether we had agreed or not, his consistent stance on his principles is what I'm pointing to, whether or not we agree. It just happens that we do in this case. And because my point is, you go back to, there's plenty of things he argued in the past that I wasn't in the same mindset of, but I value his adherence to his principles. It means a lot. And here is what 5 times August said, but no tax on tips, man, we're winning, right? I mean, that's what you get. Yeah, there's even though no tax on tips is not even really what happened, it's still the point is it's a Ross Albright when everything else is going the wrong direction, right? It's a pacification. As Jason Bassler points out, Trump MAGA 2.0 recap 1 year later. MAGA equals MIGA. Make Israel great again. $2.9 trillion debt in 9 months. Backroom deals with Pfizer, more than one. Extrajudicial murders at sea. Epstein files release cover-up. CBDC stablecoin bait and switch. Peace president, Department of War. Greenlit Palantir surveillance empire. Pretty much, guys. And there's more you could add, too. Now, Jason is back to doing some clips for TLAV, so you'll be seeing some of those coming out. An anomaly says if Kamala won the election, Republicans would still have the illusion that Trump would save us, and he just made a mistake during COVID. Now, this is what I think is interesting here. This is a general sentiment within the two-party illusion, right? The other side, they can, or rather, just in this case, I guess, kind of his side, Republicans just don't want to see it. Well, yes, in a general sense, it's always the case. I think that a lot of things have changed over the years, but right now, when you actually, I'm of the mind that most conservatives are truly starting to see it. And now you're getting large accounts like even Candace start to call it out. And at that point, he jumps in and goes, they're not going to see it. I almost feel like he's trying, maybe inadvertently, I don't know, to keep people within the two-party illusion. He goes, that wasn't necessary. The real MAGA starts when patriots realize Trump is a puppet and overrated. Well, yeah, it's very easy to yell that out when it's easy to see now. I said, so then it's exactly what we were trying to get people to see before the election when you were calling us black pill. Remember that? Maybe we can stop playing partisan games and truly fight for liberty now. I guess we'll see the next partisan game, right? So when the next thing comes along, we'll see where his stance is. We'll see when the next election is, right? We'll see if people like that can actually recognize the party illusion and stop playing within it. That statement is not a good indication. The patriotic blonde, who was very, very much a Trump supporter, who is now calling it out, says, so instead of making housing more affordable, let's just enslave consumers for life. Welcome to your 50-year mortgage. This is the weirdest thing I've seen in all this. It's literally selling you something that is the opposite, like it's a bad thing framed as positive. Why that makes sense to anybody, I don't know. And I'll just read what the statements, everyone's comments on this are pretty much what I'm thinking right now. So she just calls it out, what a plan, like this is ridiculous. Of course, Eric Doherty's like, the best thing ever, Trump's the best, as usual. To me, it seems absurd. The idea that you're going to tell us that changing from a 30 to 50-year mortgage somehow is winning or in your interest. Why do I want to be more in debt? Why do I want to give the bank longer control over my life and my account? It's not in your interest. It's in the interest of the oligarchy. Thomas Massey says, how is here, enjoy this 50-year mortgage different from you'll own nothing and be happy, or you'll take it or like it, whatever he says there. It's not, guys. How long have I been saying that? How long have a lot of us been saying that? It's the same agenda with a different flavor. Here we go. But you won't hear that from the team sport politics players. Chris Raziani says government owns every home as it is, which I constantly point that out. Property tax is the rent paid to governments. I agree. You don't own anything if you still have to pay to the government. If you don't pay that, they take it back. That's not own. We don't really own things in this country anymore. It's just be sure to pay your rent if you want to keep your home. A 50-year mortgage will mean the bank will own your home for 50 years. I argue again I agree with him, even beyond that, property tax and everything else. It's not the reality. But he goes, bank and state, you will own nothing and be happy. This is Trump posting this. Great American presidents, 30-year mortgage, Trump for 50-year. Right, because I think somebody said, right, because it's the years of the mortgage that identify the great presidents, right? This doesn't make sense, really. But as Patriotic Blonde also points out, Israel, that was Andrew Torba from Gab, Israel gets $50 billion on top of everything else they've gotten, and you get a 50-year mortgage. And she says, what a plan. It's crazy. Now, Mel points out, Americans, we'd really like some affordable housing, right? That's what everyone's calling for. And then Trump says, well, best I can do is an extra 20 years of usury. It's just perfect. I don't know. It's almost kind of humorous why they thought this would go over well. I think this was a very large misstep. As far as I can tell, most people, even on this platform, are not having this. Here is somebody saying, President Trump's 50-year mortgage explained. This is a good, quick little graphic. 2021, $500,000 house, 3% interest rate, payment, $2,108 a month. Mortgage, 30-year mortgage, total interest payments, oops. Oh, dang it. Sorry, I hit something on accident there. Mortgage, 30-year mortgage, total interest payments, total comes out to $257,887. 260 grand. Sorry, 260, grand. 2025, $500,000 house, same price for the house, 7% interest rate, $3,008 a month. 50-year mortgage comes out to just over $1 million, right? With all the interest, right? So think of for extra 20 years, that's more interest that you pay over time. Now you have the option to pay more, right? You could pay over the top what you owe. Most people don't. So this is squeezing out more wealth from people that are already below the poverty line, or people just that aren't in the upper class. Like there is no middle class. There is the 0.01% and damn near everybody else, and a very small group in the middle. Simon Dixon says this is absolutely insane. This is a $1 trillion bailout for banksters. Trump is a gift to the financial industry complex. He has done everything BlackRock wants him to do. I'm going to have to create a video on this one, he says. And he goes over the numbers too. Same thing. It's over $1 million lifetime interest. Like they're near. I mean, he actually puts this one at more, about 500. So even in his opinion, it's a double the amount. But overall, BlackRock. I mean, this goes back to we talked about this during COVID-19 and Biden, or rather this was Trump, but also Biden through same thing. But Trump originally in the last administration, the BlackRock takeover of American interests. Actually, no, I take that back. Was this? I mean, either way, the point is that continued through. And even to this day, what you can clearly prove is that BlackRock and Larry Fink are part of Trump's inner circle, which should matter to everybody who jump at everything BlackRock owns until suddenly Trump's high-fiving with them and we just act like it doesn't matter anymore. How do we not see stuff like that? So this is the reality that BlackRock and the rest and Larry Fink and every other moneyed interest were being sold out to the highest bidder. Tom Rentz, a Trump supporter, says, is Trump actually just taking orders directly from the WEF? So instead of blocking BlackRock and WEF from buying all the housing, which is exactly what they were saying during Biden's administration, he jacks up the prices. He wants us to never own our homes. 50 years to own your home. You'll own nothing and be thankful for it. I'm sorry, but the digital ID, having Bill Gates and Borrell in the White House, Genius Act, continuing mRNA support are now another gift for the globalist banking cabal. Everybody sees it. Trump needs to fire everyone and get back to MAGA. Oh, except you then go, but Trump's saving us and he's tricked. Come on, Tom. Trump needs to fire everybody. Trump's the one doing it all, man. Why can we not get there? You can call it all of that. And then yet at the end still go, but Trump's the guy. What the F? They're all lying to you. From Kamala to Biden to Trump to Bush to Obama, they're all doing the same thing. And how do we not see that by now? High impact flicks. 50-year mortgages where you'll pay the bulk of the interest on the front end and stay shackled to the bank for the rest of your life isn't freedom. It's another form of debt slavery. Now, on top of all of that, Trump has the nerve to come out and say that he'll give you $2,000 for just a one-time $2,000 payment while offering $5,000 the first time. He says the $2,000 socialist gesture, which is exactly what they call it under Biden, is throwing peanut shells on the cage floor for stupid monkeys. He's right. Now, not only the money that you're talking about, the 50-year mortgage, we're talking about all the stuff that's already happened with the tariffs, with increased costs, and now he's going to throw crumbs on the ground one time and say that's just you winning. He's a dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high-income people. On top of that, it's not even sure it's going to happen. But this is a floated idea that he's already been dangling out there for a long time when it was more before. This is just insulting at the end of the day. As Patriotic Blonde, again, says, only Trump could promise you $5,000, then only deliver $2,000 after raising the cost of everything to give you that $2,000. Tax you on 40% of that $2,000 and tell you that it's because he's making America great again. Hashtag the art of the deal. And this is John Told saying, no, Trump can't issue $2,000 checks without Congress. But, tons of things you can't do without Congress that every administration always seems to do. Just recognize it's illegal. All right. Sort of like going to war without congressional approval. They all do it. No one stops them. But the point is the same, though. Arguably wouldn't be able to. Plus, it says the Supreme Court is going to strike down Trump's tariffs, which it seems like that's going in that direction. So he says this is a bald-faced lie to poison the well and influence the Supreme Court's ruling. Very well could be the whole point, right? Using you and getting you to think you're going to gain just to get something to turn. I mean, it's what they do. This is the part that put me over the edge. Here's what Besant just said in this conversation. I'll just let it play for itself. It's insane.
It could, the $2,000 dividend could come in lots of forms, in lots of ways, George. It could be just the tax decreases that we are seeing on the president's agenda. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, deductibility of auto loans. So, those are substantial deductions that, are being financed in the tax bill.
Secretary. So, who is this guy, by the way? I mean, I know who he is, but who is this Muppet Jimmy? What's the guy's name? Jimmy. What is that guy's name? That Jim Carrey always did a good. From now I'm forgetting the name of the movie. Anyway, that failed. there's a the way he talks, it just kind of makes me laugh. It's like this, like kind of like a Southern aristocrat, kind of like, but I forget the guy's name. Anyway, he's a very odd character to me. Just on a completely subjective level. It's not even a funny, kind of like interesting character that's in this position. But the overall point to get to, it could take the form of any other, like, so it may very well be the money you've already made because of what Trump said you gained. You're welcome. Are you serious? I mean, listen to the first part again. Somebody in the chat, give me the name of that movie with, every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings.
In lots of forms, in lots of ways, George. It could be just the tax decreases that we are seeing on the president's agenda.
Oh, okay. So you're telling me that this $2,000 that you're saying you're going to send to every American might very well just be the money you saved because of what he just did today. That's the most insanely dishonest thing I've ever heard. Are you kidding me? The idea you're going to pretend that this is an effort to try to water down the fact that you, I think, either are doing this to manipulate the court or that you already realize you can't do it. And you're just trying to walk it back in a weird day. Well, you already got it apparently because of what he did today. It's a Wonderful Life. Thank you. What's the guy's name? Jimmy something. I'm forgetting his name. But you get my point. It's the way he used to, when that guy got older, that's the way he talked. Anyway, pass it now. This guy's just an interesting character. But it's just such insulting reality. Like, if you honestly cared about this, you wouldn't then go, oh, okay, well, you would call it out and say, well, then they lied about this. It doesn't take the form of whatever they want to make it into. That's not the same thing. You don't get to say, well, your costs are lower, even though they're not. Therefore, you made $2,000 this month. They just didn't. Jimmy Stewart, thank you. Thank you, Katie. So here, he says the 2000 dividend could come in lots of forms. It could be just the tax decreases. No tax on tips. It could be overtime. It could be that we gave you extra tips because you didn't have to tax them. You get it. As they say, you're not going to get those checks. These people are so dishonest. It's just the government, guys. So this person says, Trump's claiming you'll get a $2,000 tariff refund. The average American has paid more than that in tariffs already. Because as you know, if you're not a complete clown, their tariffs are taxes on you and your costs. And that increases $2,000. He says, well, between 3 and 5. This doesn't lower prices. It adds $400 billion to the national debt to rebate 2/3 of Americans' $2,000 checks. If that happens, Supreme Court is currently talking about striking down the tariffs and forcing them to refund Americans anyway. See, that's what they're trying to manipulate right now, making it sound like they're the ones that created this. And it says, but Trump is trying to frame this as his idea for the people. Think about how dishonest that is. Trump constantly makes people live lives worse, in their opinion. I agree, the government does that. Then cuts them a check with his name on it because he thinks they're too stupid to realize that they've lost more than that check. No different than the last time. What do you think? Look at what they did with the Biden administration during COVID. I mean, they destroyed everyone's lives and then gave you a small check. It's the same thing, guys. And this is just a quick thread you can look at for yourself. It says stimulus checks are back. President Trump announced the tariff dividend. What they say, we expect 85% plus of U.S. adults to receive this, resulting in $400 billion plus handed out. And how much you want to bet certain of us don't get that if it does go out, all as U.S. debt nears $40 trillion. Cut to the chase. It's a good thread. Read in-depth information. It simply says, ultimately, stimulus payments almost always end up being massive involuntary taxes. They know what they're doing, guys. They know what they're doing. And of course, Alex Jones comes in and says, if America falls, the West falls, then the whole world. Now's the time to get behind Donald Trump and his economic recovery. Well, as David Icke says, Mr. Clueless, that's Alex Jones, even after all that's happened since January and everyone, plenty of people that are borderline as large as him are starting to find the gumption to call this out. Not him, though. He says, with all that's happened since January, everybody must get behind Trump and get behind him. He says, if this is the alternative media, we are truly effed. Fortunately, it's only the most ludicrous part of it. Just so people can start to call that out, man, because he has lost the plot. Now, to wrap this up, last two parts, Mr. Sausage simply adds, Trump is getting bad advice. Trump is playing to his donors. Trump's hands are tied. Excuse for why you might explain what he's doing to you. He means well. He says, folks, Trump is complicit in the whole thing. He's been playing for the Israel-led New World Order all along. You know, what Jones is ignoring and trying to act like it's not globalism, technocracy, and everything else he's always been pretending to call out. He is pacifying the people for the Great Reset. I 100% agree with that. Now, President Trump expects November 7th, billionaire donor Miriam Adelson, Paul Singer, and John Paulson, all a bunch of Zionist Israel, influencers, rather oligarchs, to contribute an additional $20 million to his campaign to unseat Thomas Massie. Nothing wrong with that. A bunch of Israeli oligarchs buying an election, because that's what we call democracy in this broken country, don't we? So far, and by the way, that kind of is democracy. Mob rule is basically reality. My point is, this is not a republic. It's not what we pretend that it's not what this country was founded as. So far, the trio have spent $2 million to attack Massie. Axionomic enemy of the state says they're not spending tens of millions trying to unseat a Democrat or win the Senate. They're spending tens of millions of dollars to unseat a single Republican congressman from Kentucky, who happens to be the one trying to get the Epstein discharge petition passed. Suspicious AF. This is why people are starting to see it. And here, John Cleese, very much a Democrat, comes out and says, are foreign nationals able to buy American elections? Look at that, guys. You realize John Cleese is probably one of the most well-known names, maybe less so today, but 5.2 million followers. Monty Python. The guy's coming out and saying, are foreign nationals able to buy American elections? Guys, the Overton window is broken. How do we not recognize that we have been there? We're winning. We won. It's there. We just have to actually capitalize. And I mean that in the sense of this conversation. Like I said, redefine what winning looks like in this. We are winning simply because independent media are basically setting the conversation. Look at that. Look at that and recognize what that means. Megatron, another gigantic Republican Trump supporter, says Israeli political donor Miriam Adelson will lead a $20 million campaign to unseat Massie. I mean, I think it was Megatron, right? These days, some of these things blend together. Either way, the point is, I believe he was a Trump supporter who's calling it out. I just think that's insane. And I said, you can't put this genie back in the lamp, guys. You can't. Even Ann Vander Steel, somebody who has been, in many cases, many times, spread misinformation about Trump to support the team, whether she knew it or not. We don't live in Israel, she says. Take your money, honey, and send it over there. I'm done bleeding for your country or bleeding our country for theirs. America first. See, America first is not what Trump says. MAGA is not what the team Trump says, cat turd. It's about people who actually care about America first before anything else. And what we're finding out is that Trump's administration is not that. Well, we knew that and we called it out before, but what a lot of people are for the first time finally seeing. Thomas Massie exposes AIPAC. New clip that just simply continues to show you what is really the problem here.
What he promised us was we would put America first. And I think there are still voices in this administration. You've still got J.D. Vance. You've still got Tulsi Gabbard. You still, RFK Jr., you still got calmer heads that could prevail.
They were not.
Makes me very unhappy to hear that. Just want to point that out. Maybe he just has maybe he's just trying to be hopeful, but it worries me that this is set up for the next one. J.D. Vance. I mean, are we really going to pretend that he's a cooler head? He says exactly the same things Trump does. Gabbard has pulled all of the punches that she was willing to go with before. Now Venezuela's good. Now Israel's the best. Like complete 180. So for him to say that, I mean, RFK Jr. has showed himself to be completely sold out on everything before this, and Maha and Israel. So, I mean, maybe he's just saying that to get, like everyone does for Trump and the rest. Maybe he's just doing that to get around. I'm saying that just to be objective. That doesn't matter to me. It's about the principle. It's about the statement, and what you're doing right there. Massie is either I flatly disagree with, and maybe you just don't see it, which I find hard to believe, or you're siding with people in the partisan game. Makes me unhappy to hear that. And I just mean simply because, you can choose and stand with whoever you want. And maybe Massie wants to side with them because he thinks maybe they're better than they claim. At the end of the day, they are doing the same things Trump is. So why would he break them like that? Why would it say that their cooler heads may prevail? I just don't believe that. Maybe RFK Jr. and Gabbard, you could say, if left to their own devices, would be different. At the end of the day, they're supporting the whole thing. Just wanted to make that clear. Let me go back a little bit and play it all the way through.
You've still got J.D. Vance. You've still got Tulsi Gabbard. You still, RFK Jr., you still got calmer heads that could prevail.
They were not persuasive in this case, clearly.
Well, somebody was persuasive. AIPAC is very persuasive. For instance, the Israeli lobby in Congress. If you look at my colleagues' feeds now, they all look the same. They're all tweeting the same message.
And that goes for J.D. Vance and Gabbard and GARFK, right? It does, and you can look for yourself.
We've got to support Israel, and we've got to do this.
That's important to think about, right? That their timelines, American politicians all suddenly look the same. And he literally just told you AIPAC. I mean, you can't miss what that's being. Massey is demonstrating that very clearly, which I find hard to see as anything other than calling out the truth. But we'll have to see how this plays out. If he suddenly leans in with J.D. Vance next time, I'll find it hard to believe he's being honest. Daniel McAdams points out what the Jerusalem Post and Sprinter Press shared, which is the slogan. This is from Jerusalem Post. The slogan America First also means supporting the U.S.'s biggest ally in the region full of enemies, because collaboration with Israel ensures the United States remains at the forefront of global innovation. So Sprinter Press writes, Israel first. Right. And so Daniel McAdams says, so you're telling me that America first actually means Israel first? Gotcha. Guys, it's just very much on the surface of the conversation right now. Last couple points before we finish on a couple points of an overlap to Venezuela. NSO Group, Pegasus. We've talked about this many times. It's now coming out more and more. And I just think it's good. Like, well, at this point, I don't even care. I never really have who, whether someone gets credited for breaking down this. I'm not the first one to talk about any of this stuff for that matter. I've talked about it. I mean, I'm showing what James Corbett has covered. The point is, it doesn't matter. I don't care if Tucker gets credited for breaking the whole thing down. I'm glad people are starting to see the bigger picture. And whether it's not left, it's not right, it's the U.S. government, it's the infiltration from a foreign power. In this case, Biden before, and even Trump way more in this last administration, has allowed Israel to basically take access to anything they want, whether it's all the AI, literally everything the government has on you to, quote, train their AI models, or surveilling you through Palantir, or anything else we're talking about. In this case, Pegasus, which I forgot to grab. I'll just grab one of them real quickly. That Derek has written numerous articles on this. And NSO Group has been found guilty for spying on foreign governments, on Americans, on any number of things. That is an Israeli it's a spyware program. So John Scott Railton points out, he says NSO floats Pegasus spyware basically to use it in the time of domestic crisis for the United States. If a U.S. law enforcement or intelligence agency again wishes to use Pegasus at a time of domestic crisis, basically go ahead. Israel's saying, use this now. He says, I believe they won't stop lobbying until they get Pegasus to the United States. I think Pegasus has long since been in the United States. He says, to hack Americans. I agree. He says, last month, NSO got hit with a very consequential injunction barring them from targeting WhatsApp users. We talked about this as well, January 7th. Different part of the story, but same story. Now he says, NSO Group is no friend of America or our values. For a decade, they've enabled foreign governments to hack Americans and U.S. officials. That's Israel. Their entire business model is illegally hacking U.S. companies. And they've spent years arguing in court that U.S. law doesn't apply to them. Doesn't that sound familiar? Like Israel Zionist government saying that international law does not apply to them? Not really a hard overlap right there, guys, because it's the same. We're talking about the Israeli government. So let's not forget that in April of 2025, Wired reported that spyware maker NSO Group is paving a path back into Trump's America. Now, I showed you this in the beginning. Donald Trump has already overlapped himself with this group, Israel's many different elements of their internal surveillance network. But Trump has opened this door. Here is even an overlap that had to do with Gaza and Israel, as Mohammed Shihada recently pointed out. Israeli media claimed that Trump, and this is my point, it goes back to the beginning of all this, promised to allow Netanyahu to violate the Gaza ceasefire. We told you this report at the time. This is from January of 2025, right when he came to power, right? The second phase, they promised that, okay? Trump's gift bag. So Mary Madelson gave him $100 million. He promised to allow West Bank annexation, right? Netanyahu and him made a deal. Let me violate the deal. And second phase, you can blame Hamas. You'll give me West Bank annexation. Also, lifting all sanctions on Israel's spyware, Pegasus. Right. Now, one of two things could have happened, which I don't believe they lifted the sanctions. The reality is they've let them infiltrate this country. We know that. So just think about what we're talking about. When you talk, this is a known criminal spyware group that even Wired is telling you Trump is paving the way. Because there's just no misunderstanding where we are. It takes a special kind of stupid to not acknowledge how alarming this is. And just one last point, we'll get into more tomorrow, or possibly the next day, but I'm going to try to do it tomorrow after fine points. Sean King. It appears Donald Trump gives Israel a pass even on killing Christians as long as it's Israel doing the killing. Let me grab this since that comes up. Where is it? I think it's, I can do it right here. Perfect. I want you guys not to forget, it's much longer than this now. I think it's 8.5 months that an American citizen, third generation, born in Florida, has been held for over 8 months in an Israeli prison. He's lost tons of weight. He's got illnesses. They don't care. You have not heard from any America First politicians, no Republicans, as far as I can tell, not one. He's still there. Talk about an America First. How about Randy Fine? Where you at, bud? Right? Are you going to care about an American citizen, or do you only care about Israel, Israeli interests? I was going to say Israeli citizens, but I said the word wrong. The point is clearly Trump, Marco Rubio, Bondi, Kaspatel, they don't care about these people. They don't care about Americans if Israel's doing it. So same point. Sean King is showing you Christians. They're bombing churches, killing Christians in Syria, in Gaza. Same point. And if you still pretend like there's no Christians or Catholic churches in Gaza, that the insanity of not being so bound by the narrative, when you can quite literally prove that's been happening the entire time, or the fact that Jews were removed from Gaza because of Israel, not because of Hamas. It just never stops. But if anybody else slaughtered 21 Christians, it would be wall-to-wall news all across every platform across the world. But they killed 21 Christians. Israel does it, and nobody cares. Now, where are all the America First Christian right? John Rich and all these people screaming about Christian, where are they? Not saying a word. Now, I'm going to play this clip. We're going to end with a quick overlap of where we're going in regard to foreign policy over Venezuela and kind of international waters, but just very clearly see how this all comes back together. Chris Hedges has a still clip. This is from his report. I think it's important to listen to this. And this goes back well before just Venezuela. It's just the way that the U.S. government operates, and it's no different between Trump and Biden.
Afghanistan, under U.S. occupation, produced more heroin than the entire world could absorb. And the truth around this phenomenon, I think, is one of the best kept secrets of the 21st century. And the lack of awareness in the general population among Americans is really astonishing. But it's not a surprise. Their ignorance has been procured by the mass media and the government, which is hiding this sort of crime of the century.
Really quickly, I just want you to think about this. I almost started with this for this kind of overarching point, but it's just, we have to understand what he's talking about is something that is so easily proven. I mean, even we did an article on this. It's called Operation Enduring Freedom, the United States Opium Trade, 2016, right? I wrote this article back before I was doing the show. This is funny how you can call this stuff out, and we knew it. You could prove it at the time, right? And what he's getting into is the fact that whether it's Afghanistan or plenty of other overlaps, that the U.S. government literally flooded the market with heroin. That became the opioid crisis, and any number of other things in the world. And so what we're talking about is how many major stories there are like that, where you can. It's been this long story, and it's not just left-right paradigm. It's the entire media apparatus that controls, contracts, and lets some information out, but ultimately controls the largest point. And they do this with every story, whether they even realize it or not. So where we are today, I want you to consider whether that's everything else in the same way, whether it's Trump lying about grocery prices or the ongoing war or the genocide. We know the reality. It's always been there. They're just lying to you. They're deceiving you about the bigger truth. Now I'm going to play this back. I want you to think about the bigger point about not just the heroin and the opioid crisis, but the fact that the U.S. government can conduct such an obvious agenda in plain daylight and then just lie to the world about it. And the power structures all know, but the average people are gaslit by the media, gaslit by their neighbors. It just never stops.
2000, more heroin than the entire world U.S. occupation produced more heroin than the entire world could absorb. And the truth around this phenomenon, I think, is one of the best kept secrets of the 21st century. And the lack of awareness in the general population among Americans is really astonishing. But it's not a surprise. Their ignorance has been procured by the mass media and the government, which is hiding this sort of crime of the century. The 2000s and the 2010s were a time of global heroin crisis around the world. In the United States, it's recent memory, people are well aware that we had a terrible heroin crisis in this country. It became nearly the leading cause of death among adults, and then, of course, morphed and transformed into the fentanyl epidemic, which is with us today and has never been worse than it is right now. Well, the cause of that heroin crisis was down to the war in Afghanistan. The war in Afghanistan caused the heroin crisis globally. In Europe, in Russia, in Australia, in Asia, and also in Canada and in the United States. All these countries that are either first world or have a large market for drug users were inundated with highly potent and very, very cheap heroin from Afghanistan during this time. And it's just supply and demand. When there's that much of it, it becomes a lot cheaper. In the United States, people whose opiate addiction have been primed by loose prescribing practices around prescription pills found that they could buy heroin for a lot cheaper than they could get, let's say, some Percocet pills that have been diverted from the illicit drug market. And
now think about this in a larger scale as well. You know, you go back in history to Britain and the opium wars with China. Not too far-fetched to think about that maybe they saw this as an opportunity to do that to the whole world to their benefit as the U.S. government or as the, Western apparatus, whatever you want to talk about, the globalist, whatever, but something deciding that by allowing this or doing this, that they could create that same kind of vulnerability and benefit from it. Or any number of other ways you could think of it. The point is that they did this, they manufactured it, benefited from it, and hid it from everybody. And then benefit from the opioid crisis and benefit from the foreign policy of blaming China for fentanyl and whatever else they're doing.
And the dirty secret, they could buy heroin for a lot cheaper than they could get, let's say, some Percocet pills that have been diverted from the illicit drug market. And the dirty secret that no one in government or media bothered to tell us all these years was that the people in Afghanistan that were producing those drugs, they were people on the U.S. payroll. They were narco warlords that were directly armed, sponsored, and protected by the CIA and the special forces.
Which, by the way, continued through Trump's last administration and continues now in many ways as they pretend to fight drugs when really what they're getting into, we'll point this out to end, is not even remotely what they're claiming. In many cases, random innocent fishermen, but in some cases, drugs, but not in the context they're claiming, and really just about creating a context.
That complicity went all the way up to the top of the corrupt Afghan client state, Hamid Karzai and his family. They were definitely implicated in it, and many other named warlords, I have their names in the book, demonstrate for a fact that this government, this client government in Afghanistan was effectively, the biggest drug cartel in world history. And the fact that the United States, the whole of the United States government was complicit in this is really mind-boggling to contemplate.
Yep. Now really think about that in the larger context of what Trump says he's doing right now. It's insulting, and it should be. As always, the ones literally doing the thing, claiming like they're the ones saving you from it, is like the worst of the worst. Now, check out this article discussing this. It's the same idea. It's about the use of this. And, what he's discussing is the long-term after this article. Now, here's what Jesse Waters had to say. And this isn't not necessarily connected to the exact same point, but it's just the insult. I don't even know what to call this, the right word for this. The demeaning. Jesse Waters, the way he's framing this, acting like it's intelligence to discuss this foreign policy in this way. And I guess we're back to Greenland, apparently. I almost feel like it's a distractionary tactic because just going right back to we're taking Greenland. The thing that was a troll and they were all making fun of you for falling for it. Now they're going, Greenland, we're going to take it because we can. Like, in what world is this not insulting to everybody? You're just going to seize the territory because that's the peace president? But he's acting like this is what big boys do. Like they're laughing at you. I think I hope people can understand the way they're doing this. Jesse Waters using these mindless repeaters to convince you that somehow adults in the room would do the thing that they would murder other people for doing. It's mindless.
Being friendly to the world is what got us in this mess. We're not in high school. We don't need friends.
Yeah, who cares about relations with other nuclear powers? Pshaw. We just get out there and do what we want because we're tough guys and we have big, it's stupid. Like that sentiment, it pains me how dumb that is. The idea that we're not in high school. Who are you talking to? What kind of dumbed down audience are you projecting right there? The idea that we don't need relations with foreign countries. Now, I'm of the mind that absolutely America first. We don't need to worry about foreign wars, but the idea of not having relations with foreign powers and like in a kind of conversational sense or like relaying back and forth, not necessarily involved with foreign policy agendas. But the idea that we don't, it just seems insane to me. Because what he's really trying to say is not that we don't want to work with them because we're focusing on America, but we don't work with them because we're going to take what we want. We don't want to be friends with them. We're going to muscle our way into everything we want. Okay, that's not what you're promising the world. That's not America first. That's not about America's interests first. That's not about no foreign wars or American police. It's the exact opposite. It's everything Biden was doing plus some. Just like Biden was everything Trump was doing plus some. Just like that last Trump was everything, it goes on that way every time.
The world is what got us in this mess. We're not in high school. We don't need friends. Every country puts their interest first.
That's true.
And when our interests align, we can do business. And when they don't, that's life.
Yeah, that's completely fair, but that's not what's actually happening. And even the way you just started that is not, and I'm not saying we have to be hanging out and high-fiving as friends. The point is he's talking about working with foreign countries and then framing that as not what adults do. Then goes on to say, but that's what we do when we have deals. And it just doesn't make any sense. What they're trying to do is say what Democrats did were weird, childish, friendly things. It's just playing at your division tactics, hoping that by saying Democrats are bad at this, whatever Trump's doing now is the right thing. That's the basic binary way that they convince people to do whatever they're currently doing. Same thing happens on the other side.
If we have to burn down a few bridges with Denmark to take Greenland, we're big boys.
Oh, yeah, because, crime, international law, who cares? Let's take it because, we're strong. Because that is what might makes right is. Peace through strength is what it means might makes right. It means we can take what we want because we think we're owed that. We deserve it because it's in our interest. Who cares if we're literally stealing land from a foreign country? That's colonialism, guys. We're right back in the beginning of this, and he's acting like big boys, put on the big boy pants, and steal territory.
Dropped A-bombs on Japan, and now they're our top ally in the Pacific.
Yeah, so by that logic, we should just bomb everybody and say, be our friend. I just don't know why people don't ridicule people like this. Understand as well that they were retreating. They bombed it because they wanted to anyway. They're the evil aspect in that conversation. You literally dropped bombs on an entire society to see what happened and to threaten Russia. And the reality being that they were already retreating and you didn't need to do that. But yeah, we did that. And then we basically muscled them into being under our thumb. Isn't that what freedom looks like? Jesse, you're either really, really out of the know in this conversation or you are just parroting what you're told. Probably both. He looks like a Don Lemon to me, quite frankly. He's just in the position and they say what they're told. Just like everybody in these positions, they are not out there uniquely telling you their opinions.
We may have to burn a bridge to build a big, beautiful new one to the next generation. America's not handcuffed by history. Trump knows what we need.
It gives me a headache to think that there are people that act like this guy is some kind of insider, like he's giving you some hip inside take. He's talking about imperialist control. He's talking about stealing from foreign countries. And he's talking about, I guess the first point is sort of like we don't need friends because we're going to be powerful and take what we want. This should be laughed at. It really should. But there's far too many idiots out there that just parrot what the team says, who secretly don't even care. It's at the end of the day, don't even care, I think, about what's happening. They have an interest in simply going, what he said, I agree with, because that's what benefits me. Far too much of that is happening. Afshan Rassani points out that this is Hegseth saying, we're not building for peacetime. He says, quote, we are pivoting the Pentagon and our industrial base to a wartime footing. Now, that's not the same as saying during peace, prepare for war, the thing he says before. He's saying we're shifting to a wartime footing. This is not peacetime, guys. It's not a peace president. They are beginning to shift into war like we always told you they would, like they never stopped doing. But my point is he's saying it now. They've never stopped. This government has never stopped being at war since World War II, or really since, you could argue different nuances, but even more specifically, never declared war since World War II and has been a perpetual state of forever war as far back as you can look. So this is not new. He's just now calling it that. And now you're going to continue to call him a peace president because they claim he ended things that didn't even stop. Now, here's a little bit of nuanced understanding. Oh, wait. Let me make sure I didn't miss that. Oh, there it is. Of the situation that I think you should hear. And this is also from his Going Underground show, just about where this goes back to. And it's not unique to one side or the other. And this is about much more than, or it's not even close to about protecting anybody or stopping drugs. It's what it's always been. It's imperialism.
If you add the quantitative easing over the past week, which then can be leveraged into that system, does that not necessitate wars? I mean, the United States has an economic necessity for wars, and that's why Trump, he didn't care that the MAGA base didn't like his 41 billion to Raytheon, 33 billion to Northrop, 34 billion to General Dynamics, 33 billion to Boeing. That was the big, beautiful bill. As, social programs for drug addicts in the inner cities of America were cut.
Well, some of them continue, by the way, in Africa, that Trump's administration continued, that nobody likes to talk about. Look it up.
But what they really want, I mean, and what you're hinting at, is yes, they need collateral to underpin all of these liabilities on their bank accounts, their bank sheets, and so they've got to get. They need resources. They need the oil of Venezuela. They need the Arctic. They need the Middle Eastern
rare earth minerals
resources. Partly just to reinforce, because when you get to the end of your leverage, you can't give more credit until you get more assets on your balance sheet. And so they want the assets of Venezuela and the Middle East on their balance sheets so they can lend more and therefore take more resources, buy and lend to countries that have resources, and then use those, if you like, for further expansion. Everything is about expansion. America thrives on expansion. And so all of these things connected by, that America is getting, first of all, overwhelmed by its deficits and is getting anxious and very antsy about the fact that there seem to be sort of problems in the credit markets, or in the shadow banking area.
Yeah.
In things we've seen it by subprime auto loans now and other things.
Like that's the reference, I believe, to 2008, but that problem still exists is the point. It got worse later. They just have pinned it up differently. Let's not forget that the most obvious shadow bank in the conversation, that's BlackRock.
A number of companies gone bankrupt. So they don't know what's there. And so I think that's why they're trying to pull in money as fast as they can.
Yeah, by stealing it from whoever they can, right? But according to Jesse Waters, we don't need friends. Just take what you want. Hashtag freedom. Well, let's talk about the overlap of this while they're bombing ships in the middle of the ocean, claiming to fight narco-terrorism, right? Well, we just talked about Afghanistan and the reality of building the largest drug cartel in the world that they all still continue to work through. And then don't forget, guys, I've said this 1,000 times. With Syria, I think we can clearly see by now. But in Afghanistan, the same point applies. They're still involved there. I've said this from the very beginning. And Trump even let that out of the bag when he talked about trying to take the base back. That's not just some off-the-cuff thought. They're still involved down on the ground. It's constant. And they lied to you every single time they deal with this. So the point is, as Trump says he's sending U.S. special operators to fight Mexican drug cartels, it's embarrassing to argue that they care about any of this while they've provably worked with these drug cartels in Mexico, as I just showed you even, I'll grab this one yet again, of the DEA. We just talked about this. This is a new report from August of 2025. The wiretap, the DEA laundered $19 million of drug cartel money into cash and crypto. Guess how? Nothing has happened. No one's gone to jail. As far as I could tell, nothing actually happened. And this is the DEA, right? Isn't this the FBI that should be investigating this? Where you at, Cash? Is anybody going to go to jail? Pretty sure that's not going to happen. So we're going to fight the drug cartels while we're protecting the drug cartels, while we're becoming a drug cartel or have been in Afghanistan. It's insulting to your intelligence if you understand what they've always been doing. And in regard to the people they're bombing, Associated Press, Trump has accused boat crews of being narco-terrorists. The truth, AP found, is more nuanced. Now, it's worth reading the whole article, but to end quickly, it says one was a fisherman struggling to eke out a living in this one boat on $100 a month. Another was a career criminal. A third was a former military cadet. And a fourth was a down on his luck bus driver. Now, the argument goes that some of these boats do have cocaine on them. But what's interesting is this is what I kept telling you before, is that some of these places are going from places that are not restricting this. Just because the U.S. argues that's a problem and lies saying it's going to the United States, wasn't fentanyl, that means they can just internet bomb. I mean, look, if this country believes that it's not illegal to have cocaine and they're shipping it to a country that doesn't believe it's illegal to have cocaine, what are we talking about? We're talking about the U.S. government stepping in and using this to execute its worldwide agenda and killing people in the process, but not even which are all criminals. So you have people that are paying, like this guy, $100 a month, being paid to work on this boat. Now, all of that's to say, let's just even say you think it's okay to execute all these people because of cocaine on the boat that's not even illegally going to the United States. And it's also in international waters, which the U.S. has no authority to do that. But what about the fishermen? Right? He's not breaking the law in the context of where he's from. He's working on this boat. He's not a narco-terrorist. None of them are. They're simply shipping cocaine that you argue is a crime because you control people put in their bodies. It's an argument from print about whether you think these things are inherently bad or not. But all that aside, they're not all criminals, or rather, they're not all narco-terrorists. At the very least, they're not all any of them are not justifiable to execute without any kind of process. But quite a far cry from all MS-13 Trendeiragua terrorist monster rapist, right? But no one cares anyone who was parroting that without evidence, they don't care when there's evidence anyway, because they were going to parrot what they were told anyway. Anybody who cared about evidence has always been going, well, we don't know for sure because they haven't given us anything. Why do you think that? Because now the evidence shows they were lying to you. Either they lied or they didn't care in the first place. It's disgusting. Now, end with this clip. Just a quick thing about Africa, I think, but it's the general point. It's a Freudian slip about what they're really doing. And I do believe this is actually what this is. Because at the end of the day, I think they know what they're doing to these countries, and they kind of frame it as building public-private partnerships to help everybody grow as they steal and always have and are doing that as we speak. Exploit. I'll leave it with this clip. Thank you for tuning in today. That's been there the whole time. I hate that. That was the podcast. It was the rim of that cup was barely in the shot the whole time. But thank you for tuning in, guys. You know, I mean, it's an interesting time because it's I argue there's a lot of things to be happy, but not happy, but, you know, positive momentum. We're watching things change. We're watching narratives break down, awareness around things like Zionism in Israel that I never, ever would have thought would come to pass. I don't know how you see that as anything but positive. Of course, they're going to make your life as uncomfortable as possible so that you stop pointing to it. Now is the time to find your courage, right? Now is the time to find that Constitution, stand up and fight for what you believe in. I mean, you know, we always talk about the history of people who stood up and fought for what they want, what they believed, what they, fought for their principles, fought for a better world. Well, if you listen to Mark Levin, not on my watch, bub. You're not going to change the world with your podcast, he said, right? That's desperation. That's fear. Fear of you, of your ability to reach people with the truth. So show him how powerful that is. Show everybody. Take the time, find your path, right? Find the courage to see that path and to follow it through. I mean, I think right now we are watching something very profound. And I think if we don't continue to see this through, we are going to see it wind back like it always does. The left-right paradigm will drive it back into place. It's up to us to decide to fight for something different. Never do I mean violence, but I mean fight for it. So thank you for tuning in. If you believe in our work, support what we're doing, putting this content out for free, let us know what it's worth to you. We're going to keep doing it regardless, but we can't continue to grow without your support. So thank you for tuning in. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
How can we help foster the public-private partnerships, bringing American capital and expertise and standards to Africa so that we can keep exploiting, so that we can exploring where we can get these minerals?
Anyway, welcome to the State Department. I think we have some interns in the back. Welcome. Good to see you in this exercise in transparency and democracy.
Is that what it is?
Sorry,
I
didn't mean to break
thought
out
it was an
laughter.
exercise in spin and obfuscation.
All right. Can you tell this is my last briefing before vacation? Anyway.